are you? Really? Where do you come? How do you come to be?
We are spiritual
Spiritual
beings
beings have
having a human
human.
experience. What makes us human is I believe that we're all children of God, and it's our empathy. It's our empathy towards others. It's our ability to experience love, to share love with others.
What if nothing existed? Just imagine
Right.
a scenario where there is nothing. I mean, there's no life, there's no
Yeah.
sun, there's no planet. It scares the life, the daylight out of me to this. Every time I think about it, it literally like I start to sweat. Like it's visceral to me.
There was this ancient kind of a mother civilization that was highly advanced, and then a comet hit this planet around close to 13,000 years ago and wiped them out.
Why is the mainstream? It doesn't matter if it's media, mainstream archaeology. It's almost like they're so dogmatic that they refuse. They have like this, almost like they have an ideology. They have a narrative that it's like, okay, we all agree this is how it is, and anything that deviates from that is either disappears or is shut down. You get, I mean, it's
You're exactly right.
I'm really, really curious about, because in the I want to say the last few years of my life, I've been really not existential. Like I've been kind of awakened. I'm beginning to think deeper about who we really are, where we really come
Mhm.
from, and understanding our reality and our history. And then when you really start thinking about it, you realize that even when you start looking back, you really don't know where you come from, and you really have no idea how many people have lived before you, and the civilizations that have been here, and all the technology that they have, and all the history that they've created, and all, like, there's so much there to unpack that I figured, you know what? And obviously, you go out on the internet, you watch people like the Billy Carson, the Forbidden Knowledge guy, and you when and when people start talking about stuff like this, it sounds far fetched,
Mhm.
but for some reason, mainstream media just kind of, I don't even understand the reason why they will be, well, they would call it conspiracy theories, or they would tag it with something to give it, to devalue what that information is actually trying to tell you. Why don't you just put the information out there and let people decide? Most people are smart enough to understand when they see BS, they know it's BS. When they see something that makes sense, it makes sense. You ain't gotta tell me. I mean, everybody, we got brains. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Why don't you go ahead and let the people know who you are and what you do and what you're about, and how? I mean, kind of give us your origin story. I really like to get to know the person beyond the function. Like, who are you? Where you were
Yeah.
born? What's your origin story? What's
Sure.
Give us some background on yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing, Armel. You sound like a lifelong learner like myself, and you have that sense of curiosity. And like you said, listening to the mainstream news, there's so many half-truths and distortions. And I fully agree with what you said. Why not put the information out there? And we're smart enough, let us look into it,
Yeah,
do our own research, and make our own
decision.
decisions, you know.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate what you shared, and there's definitely some parallels there. I'm originally from Portland, Oregon. I live across the river now in Washougal, Washington,
Okay.
in an area known as the Gateway to the Gorge. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Columbia River Gorge. If you're ever out in the Pacific Northwest, take
Okay.
a trip to the gorge. It's absolutely beautiful.
Oh
A lot
wow.
of
Yeah.
nature surrounding me. I have two sons. One is
Wow.
13 and one is going to turn 17 this month. And believe me, Armel, the time goes by quick. It just
Oh
seems like
wow.
yesterday they were in diapers, and now
Oh wow.
my oldest son, he's I'm 6 foot tall, and I believe he's already taller than me now, and he's turning 17.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah, they grow quickly, but they are a blessing.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, so what started this journey for me is when I was a young boy, there was a number of different TV programs on at the time. One was called In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. He's
Mm.
the guy from Star Trek. He played Spock, very well known. He was a host of this show, and it was all about ancient civilizations and just unexplained things. They had stuff on the Bermuda Triangle, on Atlantis, and things like that. And I was just very interested, even from a young boy. And I would go to the school library and check out books on those types of subjects. So it started when I was very young, and when I was in my 20s, I started to travel a little bit overseas, and I found myself when I traveled, no matter what country I went to, I always researched the area, and I would find different ancient sites in those areas, or like areas that had ancient artifacts that were interesting to me, and I would always go visit these areas. And so, from a very young age is when my journey started, and I met a gentleman. It's been probably 13 or 14 years ago. He was a theologian, he was a ufologist, and he was a biblical archaeologist, and he lived in Mexico. And I just happened to be researching some places to visit in Mexico, and I stumbled upon his website and read up on him. And he had done a lot of research into the ancient Mayans and just a number of really interesting areas that he explored. And I connected with him. So when I went to Mexico, he took me to a number of archaeological sites, and I had some really interesting and deep conversation with him. And he shared with me articles that he wrote, and one of them was on the Nephilim of the Bible. And Nephilim
Yeah.
means fallen ones. That comes from a
Fallen angels.
Proto-Hebrew word. Yeah, and they were giants. In
Right.
Genesis 6:4 in the Bible, it says there were giants in the earth in those days and thereafter, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, they bore them children, and they became mighty men, men of renown. And there's a lot of information in that passage to unpack. And
Mhm.
he sent me an article that he wrote on the Nephilim, and I was fascinated. I had heard of the topic before, but I was not really familiar with it. And his
Okay.
article that he shared really piqued my interest. And then I started doing further research and came across a gentleman that did a TV program on the History Channel. His name was Jim Vieira, and he did research on the giants, finding these old newspaper articles of giant skeleton discoveries in North America. And I couldn't believe it when I was listening to his presentation. He's showing all these old newspaper articles referencing giant skeletons, some of them 7 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet tall, some of them having double rows of teeth, some of them having 6 digits on their hands. Really, really unusual things. And I thought, is this real? I mean, or is this just all made up? But why would all these newspaper articles, why would they just make something up like that? It didn't make sense. So I thought, well, if he's finding this information, I should be able to go online and find
Right.
these old newspaper reports myself. And that's what I did, Armel. And I started discovering newspaper report after newspaper report similar to what he was finding. And I thought, this is blowing my mind. There has to be something here. I'm not saying that all these accounts necessarily are true, but there are so many accounts that even if a small percentage of all these accounts is true, there is definitely something there. So,
Yeah.
like yourself, it's just my curiosity, and looking at the bigger picture of, like, who are we? Where do we come from? What about these ancient civilizations that we're told about in our history books? And there's a lot of stuff left out. There was so much stuff in school that I don't ever remember hearing about in my history class about some of these advanced ancient civilizations. So my story kind of parallels your story.
Yeah. Yeah. That's insane, and that's part of the reason. So when you start looking, you just start finding this little from this tidbits, and you're like, wait a minute, if this is true, if this is real, it's like a couple months ago we went down to the Natural History Museum. People hear about dragons, And
Yes.
you're like, oh, that's some made up stuff. I went to the museum. I saw actual bones of dragons that were dug up. And I called my family. I was like, wait, you guys heard about dragons, right? We saw the movies and in cartoons. And my little sister was like, well, look at this. This is the actual bone of a dragon that was found somewhere in North America. And we were all shocked. And sometimes you hear things and you think, oh, this is like a myth, it's a conspiracy, it's far fetched. And then sometimes you run over, you find yourself in front of evidence you cannot deny that's a real bone. It was here. For some reason, they all died. Believe it or not, but this is a bone. Just like if somebody dies, you find their femur somewhere.
Yeah.
Here is the evidence. Deal with it.
Yeah,
You know,
that's really interesting that you bring that up, Armel, because there's a number of places in North America that have the petroglyphs, the writing on like cave walls that show what look like not only giants, it'll show like a small person and a giant person next.
and
And you
the way
look on the, if you
thing,
look on the hands of the big person, can you guess how many fingers they have on each hand?
six,
Six. And the little person, they have
five.
five, right?
Yeah,
Well, these Native American cultures going back thousands of years ago were depicting this. And if you trace it back in the Bible, there's a passage in the Bible that talks about, the story of David and Goliath. That's a
right,
very
right.
story in the Bible. But giants are mentioned quite a bit in the Bible. There are many tribes of giants mentioned there, and I'll just to name a few. There's the Nephilim, there's the Anakim, there's the Zunzamites, there's the Anak, the sons of Anak. There's
Wow.
all these different tribes of giants. And in one reference, when David and his mighty men were fighting Goliath's brothers, and many people don't know that Goliath had brothers. One of
They
them was,
did.
yeah, one of them was named Sath, and he had, guess how many fingers on his hand? He had six. And on the upper on his teeth, he had a double row of teeth, double set,
Wow.
one row, two rows. And so what's so interesting, Armel, is some of the old newspaper articles that I came across of these discoveries, they reference some of the skeletons having double rows of teeth. And very specifically, in a number of these same accounts, they said the upper row had the double row. So these were articles of discoveries found in different areas of North America over different periods of time, maybe decades in between, referencing specifically upper row of teeth with a double set of teeth.
Wow. That is insane. Woo-wee. And here we are thinking we are the latest and greatest. We are the best life form. We're the most powerful. We're the smartest. We are all that. And then maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe when people realize that wait, there've been people around, or there may still be even be people around that are bigger, better, smarter, have better technology, have far more strength, can live longer, makes us feel insignificant. Maybe that's what it is. But I I I I don't buy into that idea. I much rather have the truth and then deal with it. You could see evidence and decide not to believe it. You could see something, you could see this device, and you're like, well, this is a black mobile phone, and you say, no what, no, that looks like that looks like a loaf of bread. That's okay. You could decide that, but you still gotta acknowledge that this is a phone. You just don't like, or you just don't want to believe it. It's a phone, right? So
Yeah,
that that is mind that is mind melting. It's not even boggling. It melts your brain to come to that realization. And so by your judgment, given all the crumbs, all the little tidbits of evidence we have, what conclusion have you come to when it comes to our existence? Do you think that we are just like a dumbed down versions of the people that used to be here? Do you think we were just engineered in the lab? Uh, where do you think we come from, and where are the giants? Do you think they died out like the dinosaurs?
Yeah.
So if they did, how come we survived? Because I'm thinking that, wait a minute, if men were here at the same time the giants were here, did they just leave? And there's also evidence that, we might have been here at the same time that the giants were here, at the same time that the dinosaurs were here. So how come we are still here and they're all gone, or are they gone?
Right. Those are some very good questions that I think that we don't have, definite answers for.
Interesting.
We can just speculate. Um, so you asked some really big questions, really deep questions. So I'll just try to take them kind of one at a time there.
Yeah.
As far as the like, who are we? Where do we come from? I myself personally believe that we were created by God, that we are children of God. I also believe that there was an extraterrestrial force that tried to manipulate our genetics. I
Yeah.
believe that. And it talks about it in the Bible, and it talks about it in other ancient texts. I don't know if you've heard of the book of Enoch
I've heard
before.
of, yes, yes,
The
I've
Book
heard
of
of.
Enoch. So it's an apocryphal text. That means that it wasn't included in the normal canon of the biblical text.
Yeah.
However, in the Ethiopian church, that book, the Book of Enoch, is legit. They say this book is legit.
Part
And
of the
basically,
Bible, yes.
yeah, and so the Book of Enoch talks about a group of I call them angels, right? What one person might call angel, another person might call extraterrestrial, right? Because these are beings that are not from originating from this planet.
Yes.
Book of Enoch talks about a group of 200 of these beings. Whether you call them angels or aliens is
Okay.
up to you. Okay.
Yeah.
But in the book of Enoch, they refer to them as the angels or fallen angels. And they became attracted to the women of the earth, and they had sexual relations. They made a pact. And the book of Enoch even names some of the leaders of this group. It goes into that much detail. Azazel is one of the leaders of the group. They made this pact. They knew what they were doing was wrong, but they did it anyway. And they went into the women, and that's where references in Genesis 6, the sons of, when there were giants in the earth in those days, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men. And when they say came into in the Bible, that's having sexual relations.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look in the biblical text, when it talks about sons of God in Job, it talks about how Satan came before the throne of the Lord, and he was accompanied, the sons of God were with him. Those weren't, I'm sorry, but those weren't human beings they were talking about. Those were angelic beings. And also in Job, it talks about how when the God was creating the foundations of the earth, the sons of God shouted for joy. Well, if God was creating the foundations of the earth and the sons of God were shouting for the joy, I'm sorry, those weren't human beings.
Yes, the
Human
one on
beings were
earth.
not created, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
who were the sons of God? They were the angelic beings. They fell. They fell from grace. They sinned. They intermixed with the daughters of men. And what happened is these women produced these hybrid beings. They weren't human beings. They
It was
were
like half humans and half giants, so to speak.
That's right. That's right. And they were known as the Nephilim, which means fallen ones. And these giants were birthed, and they ruled over the earth for a period of time, and they destroyed the earth. They killed the humans. They fought amongst themselves. They even drank. It said they were even drinking blood. They were cannibalistic. And also, the book of Enoch makes a very interesting reference. It said they even corrupted the plant life and the animal life on this planet. And to me, that sounds like some form of ancient genetic engineering. They were corrupting everything, they were destroying everything. So, in the book of Enoch, that's why God brought the great flood, was to wipe out the giants, to wipe out the Nephilim, because they were destroying everything. And most of the Nephilim were killed. but not all of them. And then if we go back to Genesis 6, it said there were giants in the earth in those days and thereafter. And I believe where it says and thereafter, that means that there was some left after the great flood. It didn't kill them all. And the remnants of those giants, they interbred with the humans and their bloodline became diluted. And that's where we get into the story of David and Goliath in the Bible. Goliath was a descendant of the Nephilim. He was a diluted bloodline, and he was about 9 feet tall. So he was one of the smaller giants. But
Yeah.
we see that they had survived. They had survived. But gradually, I believe that the Nephilim were killed off and they were kind of bred out. However, there are many people that would argue and say that there are some of these giants here today. And in the area where I live in the Pacific Northwest, there are lots of sightings and evidence of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and the Native American tribes for hundreds, maybe even going back thousands of years, talked about in their oral tradition of these big wild men that lived in the forest, these literal giants. And in my area where I live, you see evidence of that. You see giant wooden statues of the Sasquatch. You go into a gift store, you'll find books on the Sasquatch. I've met a number of people who had personal experiences seeing, encountering these beings. One of them's my neighbor, and he had 2 encounters. This was about 4 or 5 years ago, and he never had anyone document those encounters. And he allowed me to sit down with him for a couple hours and document his experiences. There were multiple witnesses. In this case, in his first encounter, there were 3 witnesses: himself, his grandson, and a friend, all encountered this giant, literally probably 45 minutes from where I live in the forest.
How tall did they say this giant was?
He said he saw it from a distance. He said it had to be at least 8 to 9 feet tall.
And was it naked? Did it have fur? Was it a person? Did
He
it have
said it
clothes
had
on?
kind of, he said it had fur. He didn't really, it was hard for him to really see it. He's an older gentleman, but
Yeah.
his grandson and his friend described the same thing. They said it was, you could see it was so muscular that from the distance where they were at, when it was striding, it was taking these giant strides, you could see the muscles in its butt. Like you could clearly see the defined muscle. And he said it was probably at least 8 to 9 feet tall. And
Well,
that was
it was walking on two legs,
two
like
legs, two legs. Yeah. And at the time on the first incident that they saw this Sasquatch, his my neighbor's friend crashed. They were riding four-wheelers, and his friend crashed, and he was bloodied up, and they were attending to him, and they saw this giant creature at the same time.
Oh, I see. Which they was kind of trying to help him, but then they saw this thing at the same time.
Yes.
So, what was more important? Focusing on that or yeah,
Yeah.
that
And
makes sense.
and my neighbor went back to that area about a year later with his grandson in that same area, and they saw another one. It peered out from behind a tree, and my neighbor was riding his four-wheeler, and he was so entranced at what he was looking at, he almost crashed
Yeah.
his four-wheeler into a tree. So I believe, and many other people believe, that these giants still walk among us to this day.
I guess so two things, right? So one first question is, do we have, in the same way that I went to the museum, I saw the bones and those are real bones. You can make prosthetic bones, but those are real because
Yeah.
they are perfect, they are charred, they're broken, they're missing some pieces, but you can clearly see this is a piece. It was that dinosaur bone was actually taller than myself, and that was just like its femur.
Yeah.
So those things were super tall. So do we have any type of archaeological evidence that is documented somewhere, be it in a museum or in some university? The second question is, why does it feel as though this giant or this Bigfoot is hiding? Why are they scared of us? Do they not want us to? I don't understand why it's so, because it's not that people don't believe that people are seeing them. To me, it's more so like, why does it feel as though they're trying to hide? What would be the
Yes.
rationale for that?
Yeah, great questions, Armel. So the first question is, do we have any physical evidence of these
Yeah.
beings? Yes, we do. It's hard to find, but we do have it. In fact, in my book, The Red-Haired Giants of Lovelock Cave and Other Ancient Mysteries, I present photographic evidence of skulls that came out of a cave in Nevada called Lovelock Cave. And let me give you a little backstory on the Lovelock Cave, and then I'll answer your second question as to, are these giants, if they still exist, why are they hiding from us? So with Lovelock Cave, that is in an area of Nevada, and there's a Paiute tradition. Those are the local indigenous people in that area, native tribes. They have stories that go back um, hundreds and hundreds of years of a group of giants that lived in this area. They called them the Satika or Saiduka, and they said they were giants. They had red hair. They had long red hair, and they were very violent, and
Oh,
they were cannibalistic. They attacked the local tribes, and they ate their victims. They were almost like they were giants. They were almost like cavemen. They were very primitive. They wore the feathers of a hen, the skin and feathers of a hen, wild hen, and they would decorate themselves with bones. And they were very violent. They attacked the local tribes, and allegedly they would even eat the dead. They would even dead people. They would eat the bodies. So they were cannibals, and
wow.
they would dig pit traps around the area where they lived, and other tribes people that would come through that area at night. They would make the pits so they would fall in, and they would trap them, and they would basically take them captive, and they would kill them. They would eat them. And some of the Paiute tradition, they said the favorite part of that the red-haired giants like to eat were the thighs. So, so this group,
What?
yes, this group of
They
giants.
saw us as chickens? That is crazy.
Yeah. So this group of giants in the area, the Paiutes finally they got tired of being attacked, so they united with the other local tribes, and they waged war on these giants that lasted for a period of 3 years. And they finally killed most of them off. The last of the giants, red-haired giants, were trapped in the Lovelock Cave. And the Paiutes threw brush in front of the cave, and they lit flaming arrows and shot them, and basically burnt the last of the giants to death. Now, in 1911, there were two guano miners, and guano is bat dung. They were mining bat dung out of this cave, and they found these giant skeletons. They found
That same
artifacts.
cave that the people were telling the story
The
about.
same place, the same place. They found skeletons. They found thousands of artifacts. And one of the guys that made the discovery, his name was John Reed. And what was interesting, Armel, is that wasn't his first time at the cave. And he knew of the legend of the Paiutes, of the giants. When he was 15 years old, he had lived in that area, and some horses got away from his parents' ranch. And so him and his friends went to recover these horses, which ended up taking several days to round them up. And one of the days when they were out there trying to find the horses, there was a rainstorm, and they actually ended up near the Lovelock Cave. John didn't know anything about the legend, but he
That's
had a
funny.
friend. Yeah, he had a friend named Natchez, who was a Native American, and his father, Chief Winnemucca, was the local chief in that area. And so when they came to the cave, John was like, "Well, let's seek shelter. Let's go in the cave and get out of the storm." And Natchez says, "No, I'm not going in there, because that place is haunted. It's haunted by the spirits of the red-haired giants."
Science.
And they set up camp outside of the cave, and Natchez told John the story of these cannibalistic giants that attacked the Paiutes, and then finally they were killed off. But he said the spirits are still in the cave. And John's like, I want to go in there. He was a 15-year-old, young boy. He was like,
Yeah.
I want to explore. I want to find out what's in there. And Natchez says, well, don't go in there at night. Wait till the next morning, and then you can go in there. And so the next morning, they lit up a torch
Like on
for
a
him, and John went in the cave and explored it, but he didn't find anything. He just found, a bunch of bat dung there. But it's interesting how he was in that cave when he was 15, and then as an adult later, he came to mine the cave, and they found all these giant skeletons. They found artifacts. So when they made that discovery in 1911, they called the local university out there. So an archaeological excavation took place in 1912. A year later, a university came in and they recovered, I think there was like 46 skeletons and about 10,000 artifacts that came out of that cave. And this is where it gets really interesting and weird, Armel, because when I was looking at the archaeological records, it talks about there was one of the largest skeletons that came out of that cave. They ended up giving it to a local fraternal lodge to be boiled and used in initiation purposes. And I
what?
thought, like, what is going on here? Why would they do that? Why
A,
would it end
a
up in a museum?
local like a sorority?
Well, have you heard of the Freemasons?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, you're talking
Like
about
a
a
fraternal organization,
oh.
they gave it, and who knows why they did that. Well, I speculate on that in my book. I give
So
some
they actually
possible.
that's on the record.
It
They
says
gave
it
it
on the
for that reason.
archaeological record, Armel, that they gave the largest specimen to a fraternal organization to be used in initiation purposes, right?
No way.
Yes, yes. So
No
I
way.
I thought this is just getting weirder and weirder. And the other skeletons that came out of there, they disappeared. They disappeared. But some of the artifacts, there was 10,000 artifacts, they ended up in different museums. Now there is a local museum in that area, that it was called the Humboldt Museum, just a small local museum. And allegedly, some of the skulls that came out of the cave ended up in that museum. But what was interesting is they were never put on public display. They were kept down in the basement and they were kept in cupboards. So if you wanted to look at the skulls, you had to ask the curator, and they would take you down the stairs. They would open up these cupboards and show these skulls.
What's the name of that museum? We
It was
might need
called,
to visit
yeah,
it.
it's called Humboldt Museum. Humboldt Museum. And the skulls are no longer there because I
Oh,
wanted to go see them. However, I have photographs in my book of some of these skulls. One in particular was taken back about 40 years ago by a gentleman named Don Monroe. And it's a big, huge skull. And on the upper row of teeth, can you take a guess how many teeth it had on there?
two rows of teeth.
It had the double. It had not quite a full set, but it had
Yeah.
extra teeth. They call it supernumerary teeth. And this is interesting, Armel, because some people, it's very rare, but some people still to this day, they have double set of teeth. It doesn't
Really?
happen very often. And also on the hands, there's still people that have extra digits
Uh,
on the hands.
Like an extra pinky. I've seen that
And
before.
yes. Well, this is interesting because there's a tribe in South America that have high cases of double rows of teeth and the extra digits on the hand. So I think these little genetic anomalies, I believe, in my opinion, can be traced back to this intermixing of the DNA of the giants with the human DNA.
Wow. Wow. So we actually do have so this is probably a conspiracy, but how come that is so interesting. They did this whole excavation, they took out all these bones, donated some of it to some fraternity, and then now everything that was found just mysteriously just kind of vanished. All we
This,
have is a picture that this Monroe guy took 40
yeah.
years ago. So legitimately, if a random American decided, I just want to see these bones and see these skulls, we really have no way of figuring out where they are.
We have no idea. There's another article that I reference in my book that it was a newspaper article back in I believe it was the 1950s of a giant skull that was found in Texas. And in that newspaper article, it actually shows a photograph of the skull. It has several normal skulls, and then it has this giant skull that looks like it's almost twice the size of the skulls next to it. And
Wow.
that skull disappeared, right? Apparently, the University of Texas claims that, oh no, it's not lost. We have it. We have the skull, but they won't put it on public display. And when I was doing my research, what the anthropologist at that university was saying was that, oh no, that's not a giant skull. It just a person that was reconstructing it when it was found. They did a poor reconstruction job on it, and that's what makes it look so big. Is they were restoring it and they did a poor reconstruction. But I thought, this doesn't even pass the smell test, Armel.
Oh, it
That
doesn't.
is, if you look at, I have a picture of it in my book, and it's giant. It's a giant skull, almost
Oh,
twice the size. And so you're telling me that an archaeologist did a poor reconstruction job and made it twice the size of a normal skull, and that's what you're saying. That's why it's so big.
why is the mainstream? It doesn't matter if it's media, mainstream archaeology. It's almost like they're so dogmatic that they refuse. They have like this, almost like they have an ideology. They have a narrative that it's like, okay, we've all agreed this is how it is, and anything that deviates from that is either disappears or is shut down. You get, I mean, it's
You're exactly right. And there's a term, and I use it in my book. It's called knowledge filtration. And I got that term from another researcher, another great researcher named Michael Cremo. And basically knowledge filtration is, and I believe that a lot of the sciences have this. It's you mentioned dogma,
yeah,
right? They have a certain dogma. It's like if you imagine like a box, like,
yes.
okay, this is
It
my
doesn't fit in
dogma.
it,
Yeah, if it doesn't fit in my box,
throw
that
it away.
you just automatically you filter it out. You filter it
Yeah,
out. You ignore it. You cover it up. You
discount it.
you discount it. You claim that it's a fraud. It's a fake, right? So it's kind of a form of mind conditioning. It's a form of mind conditioning that these academics are indoctrinated in. So that's how they're trained. However, not all of these scientists go
Yeah,
along with that,
there's
right?
always a
Most
few.
of them
Those are the
do.
ones that get attacked.
They're the ones that get attacked. Now, most of them do, but there are ones that stick their neck out, and they're more concerned about the truth than
Then
about
about their career. Yeah.
exactly. And I actually, in my book, talk about a woman, she was an archaeologist that made a discovery in Mexico that shows that ancient humans were in Mexico hundreds of thousands of years ago. And she had used many forms of archaeological evidence to prove that that was the case. And she was honest. She came out and just presented her evidence. You know what happened to her? She was ostracized. She lost her career in archaeology. And that was back in the 80s when she published her work. Her name was Virginia Steen McIntyre, and she's been out of the field of archaeology since the
So
1980s.
council culture has existed for much longer than we like to think
Much
it
longer. It's gotten worse now,
was.
obviously,
Yeah, yeah,
but it
and it's
goes
gotten a
way,
lot more
way.
popular.
It goes back to the knowledge filtration. If it doesn't fit in with what I've been taught, we're just going to push it out. And I believe the existence of giants kind of goes against the whole Darwinian theory, right? And some of
Yeah,
these theories of advanced civilizations, right? So we're kind of taught that we went from being primitive, and then over a period of time we've kind of climbed up to a higher level of technology. But it doesn't fit if you have going further back in time, you have these advanced civilizations, you
that
have
becomes an
these
anomaly.
giant beings. It wasn't like we went from smaller to bigger. You had beings that were much larger than us that
Yeah,
exist.
there are so many problems. And by the way, you're completely right, but there are more problems than that with with the Darwinian theory, because there are so many. Like, one of the biggest problems is, how do you get life from non-life? First of all,
Yeah.
start there, and then the idea that, we've seen adaptation. It's been tested. You like, right now. I was watching a podcast. I think it was, maybe, I don't know if it was Joe Rogan or something, where he
Mhm.
was talking about the no, I think it was Lex. So there's this one researcher that works with astronauts that go to space and back, and there's evidence now that there are life forms, bacterial life forms in space that do not exist on Earth. But obviously, they came from Earth and then they kind of sort of evolved, and then we can see that in nature. However, when you actually see what it takes to go from a single cell, say, organism, right, to multi-cell organism to human, the idea that you could just have a single cell organism grow in complexity to where it becomes something like us by itself, it really doesn't hold water.
It doesn't
That,
hold water.
and then when you think about the difference, because you could technically, right? Technically, you could evolve from being a monkey. Technically, you could, from being a monkey to being, say, a human, because there's only 2% difference in that DNA. But that would take much longer, way, way more time than it took for us, because about I think it's, I don't know if it's 200,000 years ago, it's 2 million years, I think it's 200,000 years ago. At the end, all of a sudden, that's just what the archaeological evidence says. But all of a sudden, we went from being, like, say, monkeys, then all of a sudden you have our version of humanoids. That suggests evolution, but that probably suggests something more like, you know DNA editing, some type of gene editing technology that happened. And so I think that there are some truths about the theory, but the theory as a whole truly doesn't hold water. If you really, really want to follow them,
Yes.
it doesn't.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it doesn't. There has to be there has to be a creator. There has to be somebody that has the capability of
Absolutely.
editing genes at some point. So
Yes.
yeah, that's kind of what's going on. And so when I think about it, so one of my first existential questions I had, I don't know how old I was, but this is something that it just popped up in my mind. For as long as I've lived, I've always had this idea, and it came in the form of a weird question. I actually wrote about this in my book as well. So the question is, what if nothing existed? What if there was nothing? And at the time, I didn't even realize that the idea of nothing is actually really crazy. Can you imagine a reality where there's nothing? And by the way, nothing by definition doesn't exist, because if it exists, then it's not nothing, right? But just imagine
Right.
a scenario where there is nothing,
Y-
I mean, there's no life, there's no
Yeah.
sun, there's no planet. It scares the life, the daylight out of me to this. Every time I think about it, it literally, like, I start to sweat, like, it's visceral to me. And so I'm very aware that, our reality life is fragile and it could not exist, because basically anything you can think of, you can imagine, could likely exist, right? It's almost like, I always say that reality as a whole starts in the mind. Doesn't matter what you look at, anything that is not a life form, that is something that exists. Buildings, planes, cars, food, you know, things that happen, the space station, the highway, everything started in somebody's mind,
It did.
artistry, art, music, the
Yes.
mind. So if you can think that there could be nothing, then that is something that could have happened. That becomes a possibility. So that's scary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's scary. And so the fact that we are here, the fact that, we are alive, the fact that the earth exists, the fact that these giants actually existed, the fact that most of these things that have existed, and people and civilizations that have existed before us actually did exist, kind of begs the question, like, where do we actually come from? Who are we really? And why does it seem as though somebody or some people are really there seems to be an intention to withhold the truth from us. They don't want people to just, why? And I think this is how I think about things, right? So I look at the fact, I may or may not like something, but that's not where I usually end. I usually go take it a step further and try to figure out, okay, what is the rationale?
Mm.
Why would you want to do this? Because usually people operate on interest. Like, The reason you decide to apply to a job is probably because you think, you might make a little bit more money, or the reason you decide to go left versus right is because you made a rational decision, say, it will be in my best interest to go left versus going right, or going right versus going left. And so why would anyone, what would be a reason why somebody would not want you to know that giants existed? Why would somebody want to hide the evidence? Why would somebody want to discard anything that tells you the truth about our true history, about
Yes.
what really happened, about what has really gone down? What would be a rationale for that?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. Like, why?
Yeah. I believe it's control. I believe it's control. And I believe, we live in a very secular society, Armel, where, secular society tells us, yeah, we're just, um, we don't come from God. There is no God. It's survival of the fittest. We're just here for a short time and we're gone. We're not spiritual beings. So I believe it comes down to control because if you can be conditioned to believe there is no God, then if you have a tyrannical power that acts like God in the place of God, then they're going to try to control you and get you to do what they want you to do. So I believe, in my personal opinion, it's more about control because we are so much more. We are
So
so much
control for
more
the
than we
sake
can
of
talk.
control, right? Because
Control.
okay, yeah, yeah, I kind of see how that would make sense. But then I stopped. I think, I said, wait a minute. We all have a lifespan. Well, as again, you don't know if there's people that are alive now that have lived for hundreds of years. But assuming that we all could top out around 120 years, why are you doing all this to control these people when you ain't even gonna be here forever anyways? Eventually you're gonna die away, and then a whole bunch of people are still gonna be around here. Is it that important for you to control people while you're alive?
I
Man,
believe my this is just my personal opinion. I believe that you call them they're known by many names. You call them the New World Order, you call Illuminati, you call it they've been known by different names. I believe that this group of elites, they want to try to evolve. They want to merge with artificial intelligence. They want to become, they're transhumanists. They think they can become like gods, right? They want to extend their lifespan. That's their goal. That's the goal.
so
And
so they believe that if with all this information we could figure out how to live as long or longer. Are they just trying to, so they're trying to outlive everybody
yes,
and out control everybody?
yes.
And so they decide to actually keep the information that actually matters, and then leverage that information somehow, and make everybody else believe that no, it's BS.
I firmly believe it. Have you heard of the World Economic Forum?
Yes,
Hey,
Davos.
listen to Yuval Noah Harari. He's one of the
Yes,
spokespeople of the World Economic
yes,
Forum,
yes.
and he talks about transhumanism. He talks about how our species, in order for us to survive as a species, we need to evolve from our current form. We need to merge with artificial intelligence. They're
We'll figure out
telling
what that
us,
means.
these people are telling us. The World Economic Forum had their name all over this whole COVID-19 pandemic. They were deeply involved. They were one of the groups that were deeply involved in all of this. This is just my personal opinion, but I believe that the elites, they want to evolve. They want to try to be like God. The rest of us, we're not much of any. We're oxygen thieves to
And
them.
if you're right, you don't know, but you could be right. And if you're right, what that really means is information is that powerful. Information is that powerful. And when you really think about our reality, the title of my book, the title of my book is "The Matrix Explained: Redefining Your User." I published it last year,
Okay.
and one of the things I talk about, I obviously try to analyze and break down what I call the matrix, what I call the reality
Yes.
in the world. and the world is just a whole bunch of systems. You can think about it from the subatomic level, the electrons, the protons, and then you go to cells, and then you go to organs, and then you go to people, and then you go to the family, and then you go to the community, and then you go to the city, and the country, and then the society, and then the planet, and then the ecosystem, and then the solar system, and then you just keep going. So it's a whole bunch of systems. So it's I almost see reality as a stack. A reality stack. You have your protons and electrons, and then you stack it up all the way to you see 3D, and then you can even start talking about different dimensions and so on and so forth. And it's all data and information. Think about it. It's quite literally. And I was telling my wife the other day, I just realized people say, in relationships you have to communicate, but that's really true for everything at every level. Cells have to talk to each other, atoms have to
Yes,
talk to each other, countries have to talk to each other. And
that's
so
right.
it's all about information. And so if you have the most accurate information, and nobody else has that information, and you understand how you can use that information to leverage that information, to take advantage of that information, you have a leg up on everybody.
You are so correct, Armel. And that's where we get into talking about I had mentioned the Freemasons. You have these societies like the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the Illuminati. These are allegedly groups that have this ancient knowledge. And guess where they claim they got it from? The ancient mystery schools. Goes back to Egypt, even going back to the ancient Sumerian civilization, some of the earliest civilizations
Right,
that in our history books. And I believe there are civilizations that go way back,
way
further
back.
than that.
Yeah, I have a question about it. So I was listening to a lot of people talk about ancient Sumerians, and they seem to come up a lot when you start talking about ancient. I have a whole bunch of questions. I don't even know where to start. But one of the things that I'm trying to figure out is I know that the ancient Sumerian tablet gives us a lot of information about, some of these giants. They talk about the Anunnaki and so on and so
Yes.
forth, right? So my first question is because I'm a data guy. I like to look at facts. So one of the things I talk about in my book is truth, and I basically make the point that belief proceeds from truth. It shouldn't precede truth. So you could decide to believe something after understanding what the facts are. Now you choose to believe or not believe. That's a completely separate proposition. So I don't
Yes.
usually talk about believing whether this is true or not. I'm talking about what is true. I believe it. Go ahead, knock yourself out. Believe or don't believe. So how did we how were we able to translate what we found on the Sumerian tablets? Because my understanding was up until the 1800s, we knew these tablets were there, they might have been dated, but there was some guy, some way figured out what was written on the tablets. That's the first question. Okay. How did we figure out what was written on the tablets? That's one question. The second question is why why is it that the information that is written in this tablet some way somehow and along with the hieroglyphics because what you find in the Bible, right, is almost as if some of it some of the things you find in the Bible are kind of the stories kind of align with some of these ancient stories, like the
Mm-hmm.
story of Moses, for instance. And when you even some aspects of the story of there's this other character in the Bible. I don't think it's actually Jesus, but at the very least, I know okay, the story of Enoch as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, the story of Noah story. That's what I was
Oh,
trying to
right.
get.
Are you referring to the Epic of Gilgamesh where it talks
Yes,
about the flood and then there's the flood of the
exactly,
Bible? Yeah,
exactly,
very
exactly. So
interesting parallels. There are very
very, very
interesting.
interesting
So
parallel.
okay, just focusing on the flood part with Gilgamesh and the Bible flood, right? The
Yeah,
stories are very similar. They're very
very.
similar. But in the book of Enoch, it talks about the construction of the ark, so to speak, but it was more like a cube. It was more like a cube.
Exactly.
And
So
it didn't
the ship is off. It's not a boat. It wasn't a
no,
boat.
it's more like a cube, and as far as I know, it didn't get into a lot of details. However, when you look at the biblical account of the creation of the ark, there's many specific details on how the ark was created. It was like gopher wood. It gives the specific dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
and there are people that have even recreated. There's some place here in the United States using the dimensions of the mention in the Bible of the ark, they reconstructed it, a full ark. And you could go in and they have the different levels. And it was determined by experts that the construction of the ark mentioned in the Bible that could withstand waves of up to 500 feet high. So
Wow.
we have very detailed construction of the ark in the Bible that can be functional in a
Hmm.
great flood. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, they don't go into the details. They said it's more like a cube. So
Hmm.
I just find it interesting that the stories kind of parallel, but in the Bible there was kind of much more
Much,
detail
much
as
more,
to and
much
why
more detail.
if it was just a story, right? If it was just for entertainment purposes or to, just put out there, why would they have so many details that you could reconstruct this arc and it would be able to withstand waves of 500 feet high?
Exactly. And and what about the first part of my question? How do you think, so first of all, do we know how we were able to translate the Sumerian tablets to be able to understand what they were saying in the first place? How
Yeah,
are we able to do that translation in the first place? That's one of my questions. That's
right.
the question I don't have an answer to.
Yes. So as far as that answer to that question, I don't have a lot of details. However, I know some of the individuals that worked on the translations. One of them, he passed away. His name was Zachariah Sitchin. I'm sure you heard of him.
Yes, yes,
And he made some translations of these. They were clay tablets,
yes,
and the Sumerians, they were a brilliant civilization. They had these metal cylinder seals with their cuneiform writing and their symbols, and they would take these and they would roll them on these wet clay tablets, and then when they would dry, they would be very hard. Well, there are many, many thousands upon thousands, Armel, of these clay tablets that have not been translated yet. Not all of the clay tablets have been translated. There are thousands and thousands
that
that
still
have
requires translation
that
for us to
still
be able to
require translation. So there's still a lot more that we don't know. I don't know the specifics on how they were able to
understand.
do that. I know there was another researcher. He just recently passed away. His name was Michael Heiser, and he was also able to read the Sumerian text. And
Okay.
so his conclusions of the tablets that he studied were different than Zachariah Sitchin. And he claimed that Zachariah Sitchin mistranslated some of these tablets. So there was a disagreement amongst them about the
Uh,
translations.
the
Yeah.
detail.
Uh,
Okay.
but but like the Rosetta Stone, have you heard of the Rosetta
Yes,
Stone?
I've heard of
And,
Rosetta
and
Stone.
I'm wondering if maybe with the Sumerian tablets, they found something similar to the Rosetta Stone that was
Yeah, that
able
would
to,
be
to
great.
kind of help them,
Figure
something
out.
written in multiple languages or something that can help, that uses kind of a key code to help them do that. It's a very interesting question that I don't have an answer for.
And the next thing that one of the other interesting things that I find is um it, well, Elon Musk always uses he when he talks about civilization, right? He always says that if we date civilization based off of writing, then humans have been around. I don't know. He says, is it 5,000 years or so? But I don't understand how he comes to that conclusion if the Sumerian tablets seem to be much older than just 5,000 years.
Well, have you heard of Göbekli Tepe in
Yes,
Turkey?
Göbekli Tepe, yes.
That goes back 12, at least 12,
Oh, that,
13,000 years.
yeah.
And that site, there's only a small percentage of it that's been uncovered. It's been excavated since the 1990s, and they've uncovered maybe 10% of it, what's buried underneath
So,
the
so
ground.
why did Graham get into hot waters? What's the gist with this? Why did it create so much commotion? I saw his documentary. That's one of the things that I think it came out either last year or the year before last. The documentary that he did on Netflix. And why did that create such an uproar? Why did people turn on him? Why did he get attacked and basically slandered over Göbekli Tepe?
Yeah, precisely because what we were talking about earlier with knowledge filtration. right? We talk about
Yeah.
people have a certain dogma, and then you have evidence that challenges that,
And
right?
then, yeah, I
And
think
so
so.
they feel threatened, right? So there's a lot of, just think, Armel, of how much money is invested in some of these historical theories, right?
That
To
is true.
support, to support that, and then all of a sudden now you have evidence that's completely going to upend how many decades of archaeological research and study. Now you have something that contradicts all of that.
But that is the truth, though. That is,
It is
well,
the truth.
okay, let's just say that is the fact. That is evidence. Why would you just, because you could decide to interpret evidence, you could interpret it 1,000 ways, right? But there's no denying that this is baseline. You pick a piece of rock, you can carbon date that rock. You're telling me this is 12,000 years old. That is a fact. That is science. Now decide what, deal with it. You can deal with it 1,000 ways, but you can't deny the fact that it's right there. You can say all you want.
Yeah.
That's the evidence.
So, but then look, what did we talk about earlier? Beliefs, right?
Exactly.
You can believe something, it doesn't have to be true, only
Yeah.
that you believe it's true, like what you said with the phone, right? This is
Exactly.
a cell phone, but if I want to believe that it's a little box of something else, if I want to be delusional, I can have a belief that that is something completely different. So what we're
Exactly.
talking about is beliefs, right?
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with belief. You can believe what you want,
Sure,
but you have to
absolutely.
separate that from the fact. You
Yes.
have to separate that from the truth and choose to. You have to. You can't put those two on. You can't say, if I don't believe it, then it's not true. No, 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 no. You could choose not to believe something that is true. Just like you could choose to believe something that is true. You really have to separate those two things. I think that's part of the problem with our culture today. We go by what we believe. We like to see things or like to hear things that kind of resonate with what we already believe. On a personal level, I really disagree with that approach. But
I do too.
feel free to, you can do that, but don't 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 take your belief and cover the truth. No, the truth is still gonna this truth. This is the truth. Your belief gotta be over here. You can't do this.
It's so true. Look, I could say I believe I'm a woman. I,
Exactly.
I believe I believe two men can have a baby,
Exactly. You can
right?
believe that. That's
You could
okay.
believe
But
it, right? And
I'm
so
gonna tell you, no, you're wrong.
and some
Because
people believe that, right? Some
yeah,
people,
exactly.
even some of the mainstream in the medical field now are hesitant to say, can you define what a biological woman is?
You say, what is
Right?
a
Can you?
woman? People have a blind stare. I was telling my wife the other day that, you know what, I love this country to death. But if there's one thing that I'm gonna, if there's one thing that I'm gonna give as a word of advice, I'm gonna be like, you know what, maybe America needs to go back to Africa to learn how to live as humans. Because you saw what Matt Walsh did in his documentary. Went down to those tribes down in Africa, and he was asking them, and he was trying to explain to them that in America, people say that, a man can be a woman can be a man, and the guy was like, what? Like, what? And this is supposed to be the greatest civilization of our time, and something that is so basic. The truth, it's that simple. Like, believe what you want, but the truth is still the truth. You cannot shun the truth with your belief. You cannot take your ideology and put over your belief. Just because you believe that you know you're disadvantaged or you're being oppressed, that could even be true. But you cannot take your one lived experience or your personal ideology and decide to completely to change everybody else's opinion about the fact, which just happens to be not aligned to whatever your belief system is. There are so many people that say things that I disagree with. That, like, I was driving with my wife yesterday, and she said she saw somebody driving a jeep, and the person had written on the jeep, protect trans kids, and she said she wanted to pull her hair out. People are crazy. She almost just wanted to run that person off the highway. What? It almost feels like gaslighting. Like,
Yeah.
no, what? Like, that is such. So yeah, the world. Well, America's going crazy for sure when it comes to this whole culture and truth and
Yeah.
belief and ideology. Yeah, it's gone crazy.
Our country is under attack, I believe.
It,
Our country is under
man,
attack, and it's from Armel, it's from within.
it's
But
from within.
I believe that this is my personal belief. It's not just the corruption of humanity. It's a force outside that is influencing. The Bible talks about it as the unseen powers and principalities and the rulers of the darkness of this world. There is good and
And
there
there's
is evil.
evil.
And our
Yeah,
country, and I believe the world, is under attack, but especially America, because we are the symbol of freedom. And if our country is to fall, it's
everybody does. It's gonna be a domino
what
effect.
he does.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I don't know maybe I was talking to one of my guests about it, and I was saying, you know what? When I first came to America, I kind of consider myself apolitical somewhat. And I come from Cameroon, so I know what authoritarianism look like. So I know what it looks like when you have leaders that do not put their people first. I came from that. I know
Yes.
exactly what that looks like.
You wanted to get away from that, right?
Away
That's why
from
you
that.
came here.
And what I'm seeing now, I tell everybody this. What I'm seeing now, what your Congress and your leadership is doing, I'm telling you now, they're trending in the wrong direction.
Yes.
Because you cannot. I was telling people, say, let's say I'm a Cameroonian, right? I was born in Cameroon. What do I look like being in Cameroon when my leadership, my government is putting people that just came to this country before me? I've been paying taxes. I've been here. I'm struggling, and you don't care. What do I look like you worrying about the border of another country when I'm right here in Cameroon and we have problems and you don't worry about me? I'm dealing with all the societal issues, drugs and criminals and all this crap.
Yes.
And you're so hell bent spending all this money over there and you don't see me. That and it's both sides, it's both of them. It blows my mind and I keep saying, no, you guys are turning in the wrong direction. You are wrong. I came from this crap. I know what this is.
You know what it
Don't
is.
go there.
You know what it is. You have such a deeper perspective on this than most of us who've grown up
Yes.
here in the United States. We have no idea. We have
So
no clue.
oblivious.
We have no clue. But Armel, I believe our country is under attack, and I believe that again, it's not just the corruption of humanity. It is an
It
outside
almost feels
force.
spiritual. It
Yes,
feels like even if you don't believe in like a spirituality, or if you're an atheist, you don't believe spirituality exists, you believe that if you die everything ends there. I get it, but you gotta at least acknowledge that it doesn't make sense that it's almost like you're taking a weapon and stabbing yourself. You're cutting your hands, you're hurting yourself, you're mutilating yourself. Like it's something wrong with you. You're hurting yourself. That doesn't make sense. Self-preservation is almost like a natural thing. You want to thrive, you want to survive. How it doesn't make sense to turn on yourself like that. Almost like your your um your white blood cells are attacking the cells of your body. It's like it's
an
clearly something wrong.
autoimmune, like an
Yes, an
autoimmune disease.
autoimmune disease. Exactly. That's what it looks like.
Yes.
That is
No,
exactly what it looks like.
that is a great analogy.
That is bad.
My personal belief is that it's an outside force. Call it what you want. The Lucifer, the devil, whatever. We're under attack, and that force wants our ultimate destruction. It
And that's a
wants us.
trap.
It
And
wants us
people
to.
need to recognize that
It
though.
wants us to destroy
Yeah,
ourselves.
to auto
It
destroy yourself. Now, how
destroy
do
your.
they pull this off? I have no idea. Whoever is the person that crafted this plan and was able to put it in motion, you gotta be goddamn good at what you do because
Yes.
it's very hard to pull off. That is very hard.
Look in the United States. What's happened within the past 4 or 5 years, Armel,
It's
and
starting to. Oh my.
it's unbelievable. And so you are familiar with the Great Reset.
Yes, I've heard that, and it looks like
That's
that's kind of what they were trying to pull with COVID.
that's my belief is that is what this is all about, to get us to destroy ourselves, to create such a hell on this planet that this group, the New World Order, whatever you want to call them, the Illuminati, the elites, the deep state, whatever term you want to use, they want to create the hell and make it so bad for us that we'll be begging them
Yeah,
to
to
bring us into a new system, which they have already created. It's known as the Hegelian dialectic.
wow.
Problem, reaction, solution. They create the problem, they disguise it, they make it look like we didn't cause this. They get the reaction, which
And they
is,
say, hey, we have a solution
and
here.
we have the solution to the problem that we created. And let me tell you, Armel, the solution that they have is not good for humanity. It's not good
I
for,
don't. Yeah, I tend to agree with that perspective because it's very you got to think it's very difficult for people to get along by default, right? So the idea that assuming that countries can hold their crap together, do you
yes.
really think that deleting borders and creating this one new world, and they could be right. I'm not saying that I don't know that they are wrong, right? But just based off of what we know, based off of common sense, that's kind of like we say. There's a saying in Cameroon. It's like you're going from frying pan to fire. Like you're going from bad to worst. Basically, that's kind of how that comes across. But hey, they could be right. I don't know that they are. I tend to think they're wrong. But I don't know.
I
You
think
know.
they're 100% wrong. My belief, they're 100% wrong, and it's not good for for humanity. I believe they want to eliminate the majority of us. Have you heard of the Georgia Guidestones?
No, no, I haven't heard of Georgia guys.
It's kind of like a monument. Well, it no longer exists because someone blew it up about a year or two ago with explosives. Look up the Georgia Guidestones. There, it was almost like it was a monument, a stone monument, a megalithic monument that
Like
was
Stonehenge?
like Stonehenge, and it has 10 um call them commandments if you want on there. And one of the commandments was that we need to get the world population down to 500 million to bring the earth back into balance. Look into the
That
Georgia
is
Guidestones.
ridiculous.
Look into the Georgia Guidestones. Yeah, someone blew it up fairly recently.
Wow. And so basically, so you think this crazy people at the WEF are
Absolutely.
trying to implement that one commandment and trying to get the population down, and that is so you know what, it's true that people from the past may have wisdom that might help us. But at the same time, that's why you have a brain. You can learn something. And it's true that in African culture, we tend to view people that are older than us as wiser. They usually,
Mhm.
and part of the reason for that is because experience is the best teacher. Because usually, if you experience something, then it's really true, and it's like, okay, this is real. This is like fact. This is something that happened, and you can just tell that story and pass it on, and people learn. But at the same time, just because somebody is older, whether he's 10 years older or a million years older than you, that doesn't mean that they are right about everything. So that
That's
could be a commandment from, I don't know, however long ago. But just using common sense, most of the population of the world actually concentrated in very specific cities. There is so much land and so much resources in this
yes.
world that I think you could 10x the population of the world and we'll be just fine. It's just a matter of managing, call it the supply chain of how those resources get moved, but there's plenty to go around. And the idea that, in order to reduce world poverty or to reduce hunger, just kill a whole bunch of people, makes me want to pull my hair out. Like, what? How do you have a world with so little people? I mean, even if you have AI, you need people to provide goods and services. I don't want to go to a restaurant and have an AI serve me some food.
Me
I'm gonna talk to
neither.
a waiter. I want to go to the hospital and talk to a doctor. I don't want to sit in front of some machine, and I want to be able to go, out in the world and to the mall. And I just like seeing humans, man. You don't want a world where there's no people, there's just robots giving you things.
But look at what they've done with the COVID and just the shift in COVID, and everything is for a period of time was remote, And now
Yes.
you have the apps on your phones. You can order your food before you even get there, so you don't have much interaction with
Which,
people,
yes.
right? You have the period where everyone was wearing masks. You
Yes.
couldn't even see the facial
Please.
expressions, the smiles, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Which which
believe that
which was
that
another
these things are
ridiculous thing.
they're conditioning us, Armel. They are conditioning us for um this hellish world that they're preparing us, and it's not going to be good for us, but for them, they want to become like gods. Just like you go back to ancient stories, I'm sure probably in Africa where you come from, there are stories that parallel things like this, but in the Bible, like the Tower of Babel,
Yes.
right? Where they wanted to build this tower and be like God, right? Like, oh, we're better than God.
Right.
I want to be better than God.
That's
Nimrod,
that's
King
that's
Nimrod.
a that's a that's a real thing.
It's
People, yeah, when you have so much money, you've gotten so much money and resources, I guess all you really care about is power and control. Like you really care about, being able to make decisions that just affects people. That could be making a whole bunch of people die or a whole bunch of people make money. I guess that's really what it really comes down to, because outside of that, I don't have any rationale personally as to why I wouldn't want people to know this. So what does it do to me? I don't care. You don't
that's right.
exactly. But if you really care, then you have to be some crazy psychopathic. I don't know what word to use. You've got to be. You've got to be. I don't. You've got to be crazy.
You've got to it doesn't you try to rationalize it, and
It doesn't make you. You cannot.
you cannot rationalize it. But I believe that these groups like the World Economic Forum, other groups, I even believe that the United Nations, the World Health Organization, they are part of this cabal, part of this plan, whether they know it or not know
No.
it, and it's to depopulate the planet. And
Wow.
just like you said, if you don't believe in God, if you don't have any sense of spirit, you are just a materialist. So
And,
why
and
why
yeah.
why would I'm going to do what I want to do in this life because this is all there is. There's nothing beyond this world. There's no kind of judgment or consequence of how I live my life now. I'm gonna get as much power and do what I want to do, and to hell
In
with
this life.
everybody else, right? Because this is all we are. We're just in
I,
a meat suit, right? We're
yep.
just impulses, emotion, meat suit. That's all we are and nothing more.
Yep. Yep. That is very short-sighted in my view. But I think you're right. I think you're right. And it's sad that you would even come to that conclusion, because I think God is truly the great engineer, because if you like, it goes
Yes.
back to the point I was making about how reality is actually made of, the fabric of reality. When you really start thinking about matter and you go down to the smallest particle, and then you realize, wait, there's so much space, there is so much, everything is so fine tuned. Nothing really, I know we say evolution is random. Everything seems to be, there is intention. There's nothing that you see. I mean, if you look around you, we know that there's intelligent design in the stuff we see, like the laptop I'm using right now, the phone I'm using. It is matter that is almost as saying that given enough time in the universe, that some atoms could arrange themselves in the form of a laptop. That is true, but the likelihood of that, because if you give the universe infinite time, right, and atoms keep rearranging themselves, eventually, maybe so at some point they'll form a laptop. Yes, that's possible. But did they? No, they didn't. You
Right.
required some engineer, some in somebody's mind, design it, think about what material to use, think about the technology, think about the parts, think about how to manufacture it, think about how to. And so, if this is true, then it stands the test of logic that even the earth on which we are, even the universe in which we live, given that there's all the structures that seem to be fine tuned to support life and support, matter and support what we see, it stands the test of logic that we had to have some level of intelligent design
Yes.
in order to create this stuff.
Absolutely.
Now I can prove to you, I can show you that intelligent person, but I can show you the evidence that that tends to doubt to me makes more sense. In fact, to me, it takes more faith to believe that there is no God or creator or an architect of the universe of existence than it takes to believe that there is. Because if you really believe that there's no God, God damn, you have a lot of faith. You have a lot of faith because I don't have that much faith. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't hold water to me. It actually makes a little bit more sense that somebody decided to design this cup, somebody decided to design
Yes.
this light or this screen, or it actually makes a little bit more sense than telling me that throw a whole bunch of atoms somewhere and let them rearrange themselves for a billion years, and then all of a sudden, oh, you're gonna have life. All of a sudden, you're gonna have technology. I mean, probabilistically speaking, yes, it's a non-zero chance. However, that is so close to zero. It's much more close to zero than you telling me, you know what? If an intelligent person decided to design this, yeah, given a few years, you can do some R&D, you can iterate, and then eventually you're gonna get to a product. Which takes me to the Great Pyramid. Now, the Great Pyramids are obviously not natural structures, and I'm not just talking the pyramids of Giza. I'm talking the ones in Guatemala. I'm talking the ones in
Yeah.
Mexico. I'm talking the ones in China. Because most
Yeah.
people think it's just Egypt. No, 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 no,
Oh,
no.
there's a lot of pyramids in China.
All over the world. It's
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yes.
Now, I'm not even going to ask questions about how they were built because that's there's so many different theories
Yeah.
out there. But the fact that they were built is what I'm actually interested in. So, do you think? And I heard Cat Williams say something on the he went on the Club Shay Shay sometime early this year, and he said something about that guy. He's much smarter than I thought. He said he read a whole bunch of books when he was a kid, but he said something that was interesting. He said, in his opinion, that these pyramids and these temples that we see are the equivalent of what we call universities today. So, what religion or religious practices do today? We go to temples, we pray, we sing. He's basically making the point that, oh no, we're doing it backwards today. That temples used to be where the knowledge is. If you want knowledge today, if you want to get expertise, you go to the university. And back in the day, it was, oh, you didn't go to no university, you went to the temple.
Mm.
That's where the science was. And the
Yeah.
science was blended in with spirituality. It wasn't just
Yes.
matter, it was matter, mind, and spirit, and this whole thing. Because they understood that without the spiritual aspect, matter is you can't have life, you can't have this life form. It's not just a whole bunch of atoms, a whole bunch of chemicals just firing. There is an esoteric aspect to it, and they understood that. And for some reason, they always aligned themselves with the stars and so on and so forth. So, do you think that Asian history and Asian past, they had first of all the level of technology we have. You could argue that it's probably higher. You could argue that it's lesser, but at the very least, we know that these people understood a lot of math. They understood a lot of
Yes.
geometry. They understood
Mm.
cosmology. And if they had that understanding and they knew stuff about our space, about our universe that we didn't even discover up until recently with our telescope. And
Yes.
clearly, we don't see them with any type of telescope. At least we don't see the telescopes, right? So if they just have stones and sticks, I don't know if they would have been able to find out this information if you're just sitting there. Because if you got born, you're in county X, that's all you know, that's all you never have a telescope, you wouldn't really know about something that's way out in some, star system. You either need a telescope that can see it, or you need to have people that have seen it come tell you about it, or you need to have people that have been around it. Somewhere, somehow, that information lives on. Every freaking civilization on Earth seemed to have known. It was common knowledge. The solar system was common knowledge. They knew about stars. They knew about gravity. They knew about Sirius B that got discovered. I think it was in 2012. The Dogon tribe knew about it. Have known
I
about
was
it for
just going to
millennia.
mention the Dogon, Sirius, the
Yes,
Sirius
they
constellation.
even know. They even know about the third one, Sirius C, that we haven't even seen yet. how the hell do they know? How the hell did they know?
Yeah.
Because I didn't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how? The only reason I know is because somebody has told me, and I got the information from somewhere. So how did they know? How were they able? And this guy, Billy Carlson, makes the point that if you want to be able to build a pyramid, because when you take the map of the pyramids, apparently it lines up. The pyramid has data that lines up with the solar system.
Hmm.
From there you can get all these deductions about facts about our local solar system from the pyramid. That doesn't seem like something you do just by chance. There was some intent. So these people knew something. So what level of technology do you think they had, and why did it all just disappear?
Right.
Where is it? How
Yeah.
did they know where? What kind of tools did they have? How? I'm a little bit confused as to if, because in our case today, this civilization, we have all this technology. We've documented a whole bunch of things. We have the internet. We have like scientific outpost in Antarctica where we document stuff. We've saved up all the seeds and plants of the world in Antarctica. So we as a civilization are doing certain things to safeguard life and safeguard facts about who we are and what we do for future generations. I'm trying to figure out if they did that, or they attempted to do it, or if they did, we just haven't found out everything. Like some of those tablets, we still don't even know what they are saying.
Yeah.
So, what level of technology do you think these people had, and how do you actually think that they were able to do this? And what is the rationale as to why the pyramid structure seems to be a theme from back in the day? What was it? What was so dope about pyramids? Why did they like pyramids? Why didn't
Yeah.
you just build something else? Or did they build a whole bunch of other structures that
Yeah.
just didn't survive? Who knows, right?
Yeah. 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 Really, really great questions. I believe that there was very high levels of technology in ancient times. And where did that knowledge come from? My personal opinion is that it came from out of this world. And it goes back again to the book of Enoch, even talks about when the Nephilim, uh, when they were called the Watchers, they produced these children, they called them the Nephilim. And the Watchers had a higher level of technology and knowledge than any human had. And not only did they interbreed with humankind, but they gave us forbidden knowledge. It says it right in the book of Enoch. They taught us about astronomy. They taught us about astrology, the arts of war. They taught us
Agriculture.
culture. So all these different areas, and they gave it to humankind. And I believe that God didn't want us to have that knowledge, like we weren't ready for that, and that these beings jumped the gun, and they gave us that knowledge and gave us that Promethean fire, right? That knowledge that we weren't supposed to have. We weren't quite ready for it, but we were exposed to it. And so what
Yeah.
happened is some of it was used for good and some of it was used for evil. And even these secret societies, the Freemasons, they talk about the seven sacred sciences that they say they come from the ancient mystery schools. Well, where did that knowledge come from? It came from the Watchers. It came from these extraterrestrial beings
And
that
what are these
interacted.
seven secret sciences?
The seven sacred sciences are like, astronomy, mathematics, different areas of science that we base our rhetoric, that
Mm-hmm.
we base our civilization on. And that came from, and the Freemasons talk about this. And they said it came from what? Ancient Egypt. It came from the mystery schools. Well, where did that come from? It came from these extraterrestrial beings. In the Bible, it talks about the Nephilim. In the book of Enoch, it talks about the Watchers. In the ancient Sumerians, they called them the Anunnaki, right? In the Greek mythology, what do they call them? They call them the Titans, right? The
Yeah.
gods. Hear about the Hercules. He was part human and part what?
God.
Part God,
Yeah.
right? This interaction, this
That,
interbreeding, right, of human and something outside, extraterrestrial. So I believe that knowledge didn't come from the earth. And what happened to that knowledge? I believe there were cataclysms that happened on the earth that these advanced civilizations experienced, and it wiped them out. And there were remnants that were left. And we get into Graham Hancock's work. He talks
Mhm.
about the fingerprints of the gods, that there was this ancient kind of a mother civilization that was highly advanced, and that a comet hit this planet around close to 13,000 years ago and wiped them out, although there were remnants of them left. And what they did is this, from this mother civilization, they spread out across the planet, trying to share their knowledge to these other cultures to preserve a little bit of what they had. And that's what they're called, fingerprints. So Armel, let's talk about like what's going on now with the solar storm this weekend, right? So
Yeah.
what if we were hit by a massive solar storm and it took out all of our electronics? It would literally set us back into the dark ages, right?
Yeah.
And let's say generations after this event happens, hopefully it won't, but I mean, could you see how that would impact our civilization, going
Yeah.
from the technology that we have to literally back to the Stone Age? And you go back further generations, and then the stories of our technology would be like legends, right? Oh, there was this once great civilization. They had these giant skyscrapers, and they had these little boxes that that they could communicate and see each other, pictures like
And they
across the
went
world.
out to space. They had a
They went
laboratory
out to
in space. They
space.
went to the moon.
They went to the moon. And if even if they dug up and found a cell phone, like I'm talking hundreds of thousands of years later, they would see this little box. Would they even know what that was? Would they even recognize and even know what that technology was?
That does put things in perspective, and you begin to see how you could even see something that could be a marvel, like the iPhone, geez, or like million years from now, and you might not realize. And if your civilization has not yet developed something like that, it wouldn't register. Like you
You have
wouldn't
no reference, right?
get
You
no
have no
reference.
reference other than maybe some legends, right? Myth. Like we hear about Atlantis. There was this great civilization and they were powerful. And then they became corrupt. And what happened to them? They were destroyed, right? They were destroyed. So look at our civilization, right? Our founding fathers, they interwove God in our laws and
Right?
everything.
And
We
now they're
became,
trying to take it all out.
and now are we becoming like Atlantis, right? Where we become so corrupt? And then what will happen to us? And will some other civilization after us talk about this once great civilization that existed? And they were powerful and they were good and they
What?
followed God and they became corrupt and then they were destroyed.
That sounds a lot like, I don't know, Rome. Sounds a
Exactly.
lot. Sounds a lot like that. Even though they had 2,000, what did they have 25, 3,000 years? Well, depending on how you look at it, but yeah, they had a good run. They had about a
They
couple
they
thousand
they
years.
had a good run. And what was interesting is archaeologists has studied the artifacts from different periods of Rome, and they found that near when the fall of Rome happened, they looked at some of the statues of the males, and as Rome became closer to just destruction and collapsing, they noticed that the men went from really masculine, muscular looking men to where it got down to the point where they almost looked like you couldn't tell if they were a man or a
Deja
woman,
vu.
right?
Yep. That looks like it is so, it is so. And when you say things like this, people are like, oh no, that's a circumstantial, oh that's just a coincidence, or but they are telltale signs. I read the book of Ray Dalio. I don't know if you've read his book on principles of the changing world order, where he breaks down how empires rise and fall.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some like what we call so there's this term in IT, it's called KPI. It probably applies everywhere, key performance indicator. So there are key things that when you vet at a civilizational level, right? There are key things that when you start see emerging, kind of tells you at what point in the big cycle the civilization is. And it's relatively early in the American civilization, so to speak, but there are signs. Yes, those signs are not good. So when you basically, if you take the vitals of America, and you are an expert at civilization, the values of America are not good. They're not good.
Yeah.
And that's something that people really need to pay attention to and factor that in whenever they are, looking at the world and making decisions. You really gotta pay attention. And I hope that our leaders, man, I hate to say it because I tend to be that guy that I like to take shit in my own. I like to be responsible for my own shit. I don't like to
Yes.
sit around and hope that somebody's gonna make shit happen.
Yes.
I take charge, and I want it to be my fault when it goes to crap. It's cause I screwed up, and it grinds the life out of me when I say I hope our leaders. I think that's why some people get so fed up and decide to get into politics. And you know what? If you need something done right, guess what? I'm just gonna do it.
Yes. That's right.
That's kind of how most people tend to end up there. That's kind of the rationale. So, are you familiar with the story of well, you mentioned the Anunnaki. That's a subject that I really I'm kind of into. Are you familiar with the story of Anki and it those two brothers? I think it's Anki. What's the other brother's name?
Enelu? Is it
I'm
Enelu?
sorry.
Is
Yeah,
it
Anil.
Enlil?
Yes, yeah, Anki and Enlil. Yes, yes. So are you familiar with their story dynamic? And do you think that um, the story of Adam is really the story of Adamo, according to the Anunnaki story? And that's kind of what made it
Yeah.
to the Bible.
Yeah, I think there are definitely some parallels. There's definitely parallels. So if we're talking about Zechariah Sitchin's work and his translations of the ancient Sumerian tablets, he
Mhm.
talks about the Anunnaki. They were extraterrestrials
Yes.
in his belief, and they came down to our planet to mine the resources because
Gold
the ozone layer of their planet was
planet.
depleting, and they were mining the gold, and they were going to inject those gold particles in their atmosphere
The
to help
atmosphere to
patch the
the
holes.
planet.
And which
Yeah.
is really interesting is the scientific studies have proved that that is a possibility. Like that could
Yeah.
actually be used. So that's just Sitchin's theory. I'm just not. I'm saying that I don't necessarily believe
Leave.
everything he said. I think there were some truths, and his theory is that these Anunnaki came to mine the resources, and they were doing the hard labor. And they're like, "We're scientists. We don't want to. This is hard work. We need to create a worker to do our work." And so they genetically manipulated the hominin species, which were like the ape men on the planet, and they
In the
infused,
Garden of Eden.
yeah, they infused their DNA and created us. So that's
That's a
Sitchin's theory.
theory.
And so from the biblical theory, I believe that ancient man are like anatomically humans like us. I think we've been around from the
Forever.
beginning, for millions and millions of years. And there's a book called Forbidden Archaeology by Michael Cremo, and he has a bunch of evidence in that book. It's about that thick to prove that there were archaeological discoveries of anatomically modern humans made that goes back millions and millions and
Yeah.
millions of years ago. And so in the Bible, what does it talk about? So God created Adam, and he wanted to create a helper for Adam. So what did he do? He took the
Mm-hmm.
rib of Adam to create Eve, right?
That's
So
right.
that's a really interesting
That's
story.
very, very interesting story.
It's a very interesting. So I think there are definitely some parallels, definitely
Yeah.
parallels. But I believe that we were created by God, and I believe there were anatomically modern humans, and we were living on the planet at the same time with like the Neanderthals. Have you heard of the Denisovans?
No, I have not heard of those.
Oh my goodness. So we have to spend a few moments talking about the Denisovans because you asked me before, well, could there be giants still in existence or do we have any evidence? Well,
Mm-hmm.
in 2010, in a cave in Siberia, archaeologists found a giant tooth, and it was so big that originally the archaeologists thought it was from a cave bear because it was just so large, and they found a large knuckle bone and they found some artifacts. They found a green stone bracelet that dated back about 40,000 years ago that had little 8 millimeter holes drilled into the bracelet, which was astonishing if this dated back 40,000 years ago, that to have that technology to drill an 8 millimeter hole through a stone bracelet. I mean, that's high technology for that period of time. So they ran DNA tests on the knuckle bone and the tooth, and they discovered that it wasn't from a cave bear, that it was from another species, another hominin species in our ancestry. And they called him they named him the Denisovan because the cave that it was found, it was called Denisovan Cave. Well, fairly recently in China, a full skull was found, was brought to the archaeologists that had been found in the, I believe it was in the 1930s. A man found the skull and he hid it in a well. And he lived to a very old age. And on his deathbed, he revealed to his children, hey, I found this skull. Go to this location and retrieve it and give it to the archaeologists. And so they ran tests on this skull, and it matched the DNA of the tooth and the knuckle bone found in Siberia. And it's one of the largest skulls, hominid skulls, that has been found. They call it Homo longi, which means dragon skull. And I have a replica right here of the skull, a casting of it. I want to show you. This is a Denisovan skull.
Wow.
I don't know how well you can see that.
Yeah,
It's
there you go. I can see it. I can see it. Wow.
very large.
That's big. That's bigger than your average.
Average skull.
Can
Look at
tell.
the
Yes.
ice
Got a
eye
nose cavity.
socket
Yeah.
and the pronounced brow ridge, and the skull shape is kind of like a football.
Exactly. Yeah. He has like an elongated skull. Like this.
Elongate, yes, exactly. And so we're finding out more and more about this group of Denisovans that lived hundreds of thousands of years ago, that actually were around when the Neanderthals were around, and they interbred with the Neanderthals. And so they intermixed their DNA, and Neanderthals interbred with our ancestors. In fact, many of us have Neanderthal DNA in us. And now that they've identified the Denisovan DNA, we're finding that in human populations, particularly in the Native American DNA, and over in Papua New Guinea. There are some groups over there that have Denisovan DNA, and I believe in Europe as well. So these ancient hominin species were interbreeding
And they were
with each
everywhere.
other.
Wow. That is insane. Think there were a whole bunch of people here before we got here. They were here. They used to walk around. They used to eat. They used to hang out. They used to sleep. They used to. What did they? Did they play sports? Did they? Did they have markets? Did they have? And so one thing that kind of, not that it bugs me. It kind of it makes me wonder. It makes me wonder because I mentioned communication earlier, right? That every system requires an efficient form of communication to be successful, or to thrive, or to grow exponentially. And when I think about systems that help us survive today in the world, it's not really one system. All the systems are interconnected. But when you think about capitalism as a system, right? As compared to, I don't know, not necessarily just communism, but just as a system that allows us to do commerce and allows us to provide goods and services. I think it's arguably one of the cornerstones of our civilization, because if we didn't have, if we weren't able to do commerce, then shoot, I don't know where we would be, right? Really, that exchange of goods and services has lifted so many people out of poverty, has enabled so many exchange of knowledge, of goods. You can see this is what is driving, this is what makes America what America is, our economy, our power, our ability to make stuff and get stuff. Do you think they had something like that in the past? And if they did, or is it the exact same thing they had? Because I heard somewhere that actually capitalism is actually a system that was invented by maybe somebody that existed around the time that Anunnaki existed. and it's one of those things that emerged from this what you call mystery schools, like the concept, the system that you could, create a good or service and then exchange that for money. Now, the idea of money itself doesn't necessarily, because now we put money and capitalism together, but capitalism truly, money is just happens to be the means by which, currency by which you exchange. But you theoretically could you use anything, gold, you can use curries,
Yeah.
and the idea is the same, right? And I wonder if this idea is ours or we were just taught, just in the same way that we're taught
Yeah.
about cosmology,
Yeah.
agriculture, and so on
Yeah.
and so forth.
Absolutely. I believe, yes, that it goes back thousands and thousands of years. Well, what's really interesting is why is the human race so captivated by gold? Why are we so captivated by gold? Why would
Yeah,
we
evolution.
kill for gold, right? Literally kill our fellow humans for gold. What
Yeah.
is it about gold that you look back in ancient, going back to ancient times, gold,
Yeah.
and then it's
Because
linked.
yeah, that is true. Because technically, you really can't eat it. Because if you really think about humans, what do we need? We need shelter, we need
Yeah,
food, we need to
safety,
reproduce.
security.
Yeah, and gold is not something that you take to eat. You could argue that maybe decorations. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But if you really think about animals, animals just want to survive and thrive. And gold doesn't really. It's not really something that comes naturally. It almost feels as though we kind of thought somebody taught you that it is valuable for XYZ reason. Just kind of like it's kind of like money, right? I mean, the money itself is not really what you want. You use that money to get something else, and so as humans, fundamentally, we shouldn't be attracted to gold or anything like that. We really should be attracted to food, to fruits, snacks. That like kind of that makes sense naturally speaking. But yeah, go ahead. I think I get the point you're making though. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the ancient artifacts, like the Ark of the Covenant, that had
Aha.
gold on it, right? And
Yes, it is.
gold is a good conduit for what?
For what? That's the question. For what?
What, right? So it's very interesting. But yeah, and I believe there was ancient trading going on, going back thousands and thousands of years. Even in North America, I believe there were ancient civilizations here long before Columbus, going back thousands of years. The ancient Phoenicians, the Egyptians, the Celts, right? There was a lot more exploration going on. I think it's with just naturally within us to want to go out and explore and
Curiosity.
to
Trying to
trade,
figure out stuff.
to figure out stuff, to trade goods. Have you heard of the cocaine mummies?
No,
Okay,
no.
so some of the mummies in ancient Egypt, these ancient mummies, they did testing on them. This was back decades ago, and they determined they had cocaine in the bodies. They had cocaine, and the only place that cocaine could have came from at that in ancient times was from South America. So how did these ancient mummies have cocaine in their systems, right?
That is
Unless there
that
had been ancient contact between Egypt and South America.
trade.
Yeah, trade. There's a lot of evidence, and if you look at a lot of parallels, like you look in South America and even in North America with some of the pyramids, the mounds, and some like over in Mexico, I went to Teotihuacan. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that
Teotihuacan.
site.
Is it the one with the water around it? The
It,
pyramid?
it 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 one at one time it did have water around it, but they have the giant pyramids, the pyramid of the sun and the moon, and there's a
Mhm.
roadway that connects them. They call that the
Yeah.
road of the dead, and then there's pyramids on either side. I've been to that site. It's absolutely stunning. And when I was walking up the steps of those pyramids, the steps weren't like normal steps. They were giant steps. Like you'd have to have a giant stride to walk up those steps. They weren't like normal steps. They were much bigger.
Oh, there were bigger steps. Like whoever
Bigger.
used those steps would have been somebody that would have a bigger morphology, like bigger legs,
That's
big
right.
shoulders.
Exactly. And underneath that site, it's been discovered that there are tunnels underneath there. About 10, 15 years ago, a sinkhole opened up and they discovered a whole series of tunnels underneath the pyramid. And they found artifacts, jewelry, silver, gold. And you know what else they found? The most interesting thing they found, Armel, can you guess what it is?
No, I can't get it.
They found spheres. And can you know what's in those spheres?
No,
Liquid mercury.
no way.
You'll have to look it up after we get done with the podcast. They found spheres of liquid mercury underneath this ancient site of Teotihuacan.
Okay.
So the question is, what is that for? Liquid mercury, just to even handle it, is very toxic. It'll kill.
Exactly.
So
The
what are
technology required to handle liquid mercury is not something that you just figure out by, hanging out in the forest
that's
for
right.
200 years. No, you got it. That's advanced knowledge. That's engineering and science.
And if you get liquid mercury cold enough, if you can get it cold enough and you can keep it cold enough, you know what liquid mercury produces?
Now, what does it do?
Anti-gravity. Anti-gravity.
Let that sink in.
So I saw an episode on Ancient Aliens. I don't watch that show very much. Some of it's interesting, but I think, I don't agree with everything they say, but some of the things they do. But they did an experiment and they took this puck and they filled it with the equivalent of liquid mercury, and they had a magnetic track, and they got this puck cold enough where what it did is it floated above the track, literally levitating, and it would go around and around and around, floating above the track. And they even put an object in front of it, and the puck would go like this, and then it would go around, and it would continue to go around and
By
around,
itself.
around by itself. And the interviewer from Ancient Aliens asked the scientist, he goes, is it possible, is it conceivable that a craft could be created if you could power that with liquid mercury and you could continually keep that liquid mercury cold enough? Could it actually produce a craft that would have anti-gravity? And the scientist said it is within the realms of possibility.
And that doesn't violate any law of physics. That is totally possible in our
Yes.
universe.
Yes.
But you have to engineer it.
You have to engineer it. And so why were these spheres of liquid mercury underneath these pyramids?
In some random spot in Mexico. Was it in Mexico?
It's in Mexico, yes, just right outside of Mexico City. So there was an ancient technology, and you were asking about the pyramids before, like, why is it that, the pyramids are in all these different cultures? Here, this is just my personal opinion. I think many times they were a repository for ancient knowledge, like you said. They were the places that you would go to receive this knowledge. And also,
Kind of like university, yeah.
like university, exactly. And not only that, but these big structures, especially the Egyptian pyramids, they would house this ancient knowledge. So if there was a cataclysm, what better place are you going to put your scrolls or your tablets or your writing than in some kind of structure like the Great Pyramid, for example, or the Sphinx? They were a repository of knowledge, right? And also, too, the pyramids, in many cultures, the pyramids represent mountains. Mountains in most cultures are considered sacred places, whether it's Native American or you look at the Bible. How many times in the Bible were encounters with God at mountains? Where did Moses go to get the 10 Commandments, right? Mount Sinai. He went to the mountain. They were sacred places. They were representations of where earth connects with the heavens. And so these ancient cultures, they were replicating that symbology of the mountains. And what's another interesting thing, in the book of Enoch, when it said the watchers, the fallen angels came down, they even talk about a specific area where they came down. Could you guess where it was? It was a mountain. It was a mountain where these beings came down. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Mount Hermon. It was called, it's in Syria. It's called Mount Hermon, and it means Mount of Desolation. Interesting name, right?
Very interesting. And
Yeah.
it seems as though those ancient civilizations, some way, somehow, ended up being concentrated around the Middle East, Africa,
Yeah.
and China. For some reason, because even like the stories of the Bible, some of those cities like the river, like the
Euphrates,
Euphrates, the Garden of Eden,
Tigris.
and it's very very interesting that all of this stuff happened, and we have all this knowledge out there, and there's a lot of people that claim that governments of the world, one of which is ours,
Yes.
have have captured all this knowledge and is using it somehow, and they are hiding it from us. And as always, I don't care about the fact that something is done. I always just want to go to the why. Like if I understand your philosophy and your rationale, that's the that's a really good place for me to start, because I can start now addressing the root cause as to why you're doing it, and maybe come up with some ideas as to how I can either access the information, or how I could talk you into, or at least approach that conversation with how we can get the information. Because if I understand the reason for why you're hiding it,
Yes.
then I can rationalize with you based off of your reason, and provide just a counter that challenges your grounds of as to why you want to keep that information away from people. And that's very interesting that this all seems to be real, and again, people are trying to hide the information.
Y-
Go figure why.
Yeah. Could I share with you a quote from my book that encapsulates what you were just talking about, Armel?
Sure.
Have you heard of George Orwell's 1984?
No, I have not.
Okay, that's a classic book. But this is a quote from that book. It's okay. This is chapter 1 of my book. It says, "History is not what we've been told." So here's the quote. He from George Orwell, 1984. He who controls the past controls the future.
Ooh,
He who controls the present controls the past. That
like
sums it up what you're talking about.
that's that is so,
It's
that is
control.
so true.
It is
Oh my
control.
God, that is so freaking true. Oh my God. Oh my God. And are you familiar with the worldwide telescope? Have you ever been to that website?
I have
It's
not.
kind of like, so there's two, right? Have you ever been to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory uh website, NASA Jet Propulsion Lab,
No, I have not.
and you have the worldwide telescope? So you might want to check out those two sites. So
Yeah.
it's
So
very interesting that
what was the name again? I'm gonna write it down real quick.
JPL Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It's basically the kind of an arm of NASA. They do work with NASA,
Okay.
space stuff, planetary stuff. And so they have, you do know that NASA is basically is like I don't know, call it an arm of the federal government. It's taxpayer funded, and therefore everything they do belongs, and everything they have belongs to the people of America. So they basically have to make public everything they find out in space. It doesn't matter if they find aliens; they're supposed to share out all the information. And
That's the key thing is supposed to.
they're supposed to. And I think part of what they're doing is that, because I actually took the time. So I heard Billy Carson. I don't even know Billy Carson. He was talking
I've heard
about,
of them.
yeah, like he said, he has this group where they've gathered over 60,000 anomalies that have been documented by NASA, and it's all public information. And there's something that I saw with my own eyes that is beyond belief. So NASA has spent, do you know how much the United States has spent sending robots to Mars? So you know how I always say I try to go to the rationale as to why you're doing what you're doing. So it suddenly hit me. I've always been interested, curiosity went there, ingenuity went there, the little helicopter. Now they have a little drone on Mars and whatever.
Hmm.
And I've always been excited about the whole technology, figuring out if we're gonna go to Mars. You have Elon Musk with the SpaceX thing, and then I stopped one day. I was like, wait a minute, but why? Why does this government, or why do they feel so strong? Why do they feel so compelled to go to Mars? And they're not just going to Mars for no reason. They are picking specific spots where they want to drop those robots. They want to go
Mm.
see something. They have
Yes.
cameras. But what's also cool is that they have to, by law, they have to put this information out in the public. And what they do is they actually do put out information, but nobody actually ever takes the time to go and look at the information.
That's so true.
There is a picture of something that looks like a thing on Mars. There
Does
is.
it look does it look almost Egyptian like?
Exactly. It
Yeah.
looks Egyptian.
Mhm.
And so when you said it, I was like, nah, no way, no way. Guess what? I went out there, and there's two versions of this picture. There's one that's kind of like colored, like they kind of colored it out so you can see, and then there's the actual original picture. And when you look at it, you're like, wait a minute, that is a Sphinx. And so I was running around the house that day. I was like, I was trying to tell my wife, like she didn't it didn't register because I was so mad. I was like, oh my god. I know nobody is, according to us, nobody has ever been to Mars, but I'm telling you right now, if there are not people right there right now, they have been people. And I'm not just saying humans, it could be humans like you and I, but I know there has been somebody with hands and legs and a brain that was walking around Mars. There's been a whole society because that is not natural. There is no way you can have a thing due to weathering, due to some type of geologic formation. And how in the world did that end up on Mars? What's it doing up there? How? How do you end up with a Sphinx, an Egyptian Sphinx on Mars? How? It is there. We have seen it. That's why I always say you can believe what you want.
Yeah.
Here's the evidence. Deal
Yes.
with it. You know,
Yeah, maybe it was an ancient civilization that was wiped out, and that's
maybe
like
it was
a
actually
remnant. That's a
maybe it was,
remnant of what was once there.
yeah, yeah. You remember we were talking about them trying to save their planet with gold?
Yeah. So check this out. In Genesis, it talks about how God created the earth, and there was darkness, and there was, there was nothing, there was a void. And then
Right.
in Genesis it starts where God created the world. Well, I believe my interpretation of that Genesis is that the planet, when it's talking about in Genesis, that he is not creating the earth, he is recreating the earth of something that was already there
Yeah,
that was destroyed. He
before.
was creating us, our concept of the earth.
Of
There
the
was
earth.
something there before. It wasn't out of nothing. There was something there. There was void. There was darkness because there was destruction on on what was there before us.
Yeah.
We're,
Because
creating us.
if you consider the earth has been around for 4.56 billion years,
Yeah.
you gotta think with all the catastrophic events that have happened on earth, you gotta think that it's almost been like a big cycle. People come and then they go away and then they come back and then they go away and then they.
Have you heard of the Yuga cycles from the Vedic tradition?
No, I have not.
I talk about those in my book. In some of the ancient Indian, the Vedas, they talk about these cycles. They call them Yuga cycles, and they are cycles that they believe civilizations go through. And there's
Oh wow.
periods of enlightenment where people, our technology is very high. We've reached maybe a materialistic high level of technology, and then there's periods of time where we evolve spiritually. We're at a very high level of our spiritual development. And then there are periods where there's dark ages, where we become corrupt, where we're ignorant, and everything is technology is just destroyed. And we go through these cycles. All civilizations, that's what they believe, go through these cycles. And not only in each cycle, not only is it just talking about our technology, but our spiritual development and even our physical size. It talks about during certain periods, we are much bigger. We are like giants,
Right.
right? So even physically during these different periods, these cycles, we are different. and other periods were smaller, and other periods were like
bigger.
giants and
Wow.
bigger. Yeah, they call them the yuga cycles.
And
And it's just
every
this constant
civilization goes
cycle,
through this like clockwork almost.
like clockwork. Yeah, that's their belief.
And for you to even be able to have that kind of, for you to be able to conceptualize that, you need to have like a corpus of knowledge. You need to be able to, because a human being, even if you live 1,000 years, even if you could live 1,000 years, you still need to have an understanding of, because we're talking, the earth has been here for billions of years. If you live 1,000 years, you wouldn't really know about the complete history of the earth, and you
Yes,
need to accumulate that knowledge over time, some way, somehow. You need to be a civilization that has evolved and that has seen stuff over time. And the only way to do that is your ancestors figure something out, they document, they leave it for you, you figure out,
yes,
and then you come in almost like R&D over time, and then y'all get better, you get better, you get better, and then now you have this grand vision of everything. Like you can see beyond the obvious, so to speak, right? And you have this understanding of you're not just random, you're just a speck. Like there's the whole like genealogy to this. There's the whole background. There's the whole ancestry. There's the whole ancient history and civilization that has been there and that has helped you in ways that you can't even begin to fathom. Because if you start thinking about, you know, who you are, not just as a spiritual person, because our spiritual aspect, the spiritual aspect of us is very important. I believe is mission critical for us to be able to live. But even the physical part is also super complex. Like
yeah,
the human being as an entity, the animals, you think about plant life, the ecosystem, the sea life forms, the atmosphere or the stratosphere, the magnetic field that's protecting us from Earth. And when you think about everything that is actually required for us to be alive, and the fact that all these other life forms and civilizations have existed, that should be very humbling. That should make you feel excited and big, but also make you realize how small you are. And at the same time, how grand you're part
yes.
of this great thing. Even though you're small, it's almost like Neil deGrasse Tyson says, I'm not just in the universe is in me. And that to me kind of sums up, you know, what I would describe as reality. And so we can't go around the world just thinking, oh, when they say, well, what's the history of black people? We say, well, slavery, we slaves were shipped to America, and that's as far back as it goes. Like I was talking to a friend of mine, we talk about all kinds of stuff all the time. And I was saying, then you do realize that, today we have 50 odd some countries in Africa, and I don't even know what the land was called before my country was called Cameroon. Think
Mhm.
about it, like Cameroon, the country Cameroon is like what, 50, 56 years old? How
Mm.
long has the earth existed? What was the name of this land
Mm.
prior to slavery, prior to
Yeah,
what we know as our history? Think just
yeah,
5,000 years ago,
yeah.
what was going on? Who was here 10,000 years ago? Who was here? Who were they? What were they doing?
What
What
they do.
systems did they have? Were they countries? Even empires are very recent. Now we have countries before had empires. Empires around for a few thousand years. The earth has been there for millions of years.
And what
Billions.
was it like geographically in those
What was
areas?
it like?
It could have looked very different
Very different.
geographically. Yeah.
Exactly. And now we have this. This is something that came to mind recently. I was just thinking, why is it that, all the countries that are around, Europe, Africa, China, Asia, they call it the East, and then, we have the West. And I was like, well, the reason for that is they have like the world came together and they made a convention to split the world at a specific meridian and then spread out a map. I was like, that's kind of also recent. We
Mm.
kind of did this, we just kind of, let's just, let's call it, the East and the West. But that hasn't always been how it's been called. This land wasn't always called America. That wasn't always called
Right.
Europe. That wasn't always called Russia. Or that wasn't always called Africa. That wasn't always called Cameroon. And that is why the thing that really broke the camel's back for me was when I was watching that Graham show. He said where it disease with amnesia, and boy,
Yes.
that struck a nerve.
That struck a nerve. Yeah, so true.
Struck a nerve. I was like, wait a minute. You just think, mom, dad, your granny, your papa, two, three generations, and you're like blank. It's like, okay, you don't know where do we come from? What makes us, how do we get here? I know this kind of thing excites me, but I think this is questions that everybody really needs to like stop and think about for a minute. Like,
Yeah.
who are you? Really? Where do you come? How do you come to be? I mean, mom and dad came together and had you, yeah, but then the fact that they were able to do that, how did this all come to be? If you don't contend with that and you just basically just ignore all of this corpus of history and all of this data, that might begin to explain why our world is a bit dysfunctional. That might begin to explain why we think, and a lot of smart people, including me, used to think that, we're different races, we're all, this is white folks, this is Asian folks, this is black folks.
Mhm.
And when you really stop and think about, you start rewinding the clock, rewinding, rewinding, and rewinding, you begin to see that a lot of the problems we have to deal with in the world today, in many ways, is associated to the fact that we just don't have information, or at the very least, the information we have is incomplete and not exactly correct. And that begins to explain a lot of issues. You can think about war, you can think about politics. Yeah,
Yes.
human nature. Again, where does human nature come from? Why is that the human nature? You know, so questions like that are what kind of drives my curiosity. And I believe that people that do the work that you do, writing books, trying to create awareness, because somebody could ask, well, why? Why do I care? What difference does this make? Well, think about it. If everybody actually knew who we really were, if
Yeah.
everybody became aware, or like Billy Carlson say, if everybody ended up, if a decent number of people ended up having what he calls a God consciousness, like you're truly conscious, the idea of destroying anything or killing anything
Yes.
or being so tribalistic where this is my race, this is
Mm.
my village, this is, I mean, I get that it's that kind of helps define people's identities and ground
Yes.
people at the same time. But then that is something that is supposed to be like a feature, not a bug. But in our society today, if you don't see that these differences are being expressed more like bugs in our system versus features of our system, then you're just delusional, because these things that we're actually seeing as problems could just be features that help enrich us in many
Yes.
ways. But it's creating all kinds of division and all kinds of problems in our society. And I think the reason is because we just don't really know. We just don't understand who we really are. We just don't understand what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be doing it and what is the point of
Right.
existence. And so I have this series of questions that I tend to ask my host. One of the questions that I ask is a question that I got from my wife. One of the questions I'm going to ask you is the question I got from the previous guest that I wrote down.
Okay.
And okay, so he left a question for you, and then I have like a little poll that I take with my guest at the end to kind of
Sure.
you know
Yeah.
help predict the future, so to speak. So yeah. So the question from the previous guest is, what makes us human? That's what my previous guest left as a question, and I'm going to ask you to also provide a question for the next guy the next person I'm going to be talking to. By the way.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's interesting. A very deep question. I mean, what makes us human is I believe that we're all children of God, and it's our empathy. It's our empathy towards others. It's our ability to experience love, to share love with others. You know, you've asked some really deep questions, and I know you've thought about these, you've pondered these, Armel. And really, some of the things you talked about, like if we really knew as a collective species that are we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual
Spiritual
beings
beings have
having a human
human
experience.
experience.
And if enough people realize that, and if enough people really ask a lot of questions like you do, and really pondered that, and really, if we really had an idea or concept of where we came from, that we are so much more than just meat suits,
Meat, meat suit,
just
avatar,
consumers. Right, consumers. Like, we're just here, we just buy stuff, we just get stuff, we just take stuff, and then we're gone like a
just
flash
clock
of
in and
the
clock
pan.
out.
Right.
Yeah,
What if we realize that we're not that at all? That we are spiritual beings here, that we have
that
been
would change everything.
created by God, and each and every one of us has a purpose on this planet. And each purpose is different. Each of us walks a different path, right? But if we were to connect with that path that God has given us, and that we are here not to just take what we can, we are here to give. We are here to leave something that will be good for this planet long after we're gone. That we're here just to plant seeds. We're like in an airport. This is a giant airport, and there's arrivals and departures happening constantly. And this is just a point in time that we're here just temporarily. We're just passing through, and that we're so much more. And what are we going to contribute? What are we going to leave behind that's going to benefit our fellow human beings, and not look at each other from a tribal perspective, a color perspective, a culture perspective, but just look at each other as all children of God.
Yes, that is so well said. I couldn't agree with you more when you said we are spiritual beings having a human experience and not the other way around. That is the most compact form of saying, of describing what our true reality should be. If and that's not because you choose to believe it, that's just what the facts, that's just where everything is pointing you towards. Now you may not like it, try not to believe it, but again, if you really think about what are the facts of the matter, because you really can't have life forms alive without that. If you think that it's just all in your head, it's just chemicals and neurons firing, and you have, people say, your brain just responds. If you step on something sharp, you stub your toe, your brain is gonna have your body jump. And all I say is, well, how do you know to breathe? How did your heart know to pump? How did you so how come when you're in your mother's stomach, you are basically like a fish in a pond? You weren't breathing, and all of a sudden you get up and breathe. And when you start really adding the whole thing up, you begin to realize there is so much intent and intelligence, that there had to be a higher intelligence that literally sat there and designed the whole thing. Because you would have had to know that in this ecosystem, you needed animals to eat, the plants, you needed the plants to take out the CO2, and that becomes your food. And then the animals are doing the opposite, taking in the oxygen and giving them the O2. And then you have the bacteria that are breaking down whatever is dead. And then you have the worms, and then you have nitrogen that's in the air, but that's also what the plants need. Like, you had to have thought about the whole thing, the whole stack from Adam all the way to the Milky Way. You had to have thought about the whole thing through humans, bacteria, and everything else. You had to. Because if you miss a single thing, whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
Everything falls apart. Think about at the atomic level, you have the fundamental forces. You have gravity, magnetism, electromagnetism, and then you start thinking about everything going backwards and forwards. You're like, wait a minute, this is a system. This looks like something that if I wanted to create it, because I'm actually an engineer by training. I graduated with my degree in mechanical engineering, and I
Hmm.
know that for an internal combustion engine to work, you have to have thought about the whole thing end to end. Because if you miss, if there's a spark plug, if there's a crack in the piston, if something is wrong somewhere, all it takes is for a simple relay to die and your whole car stops working. That's just a tiny thing.
Yes.
So you have to have thought about the whole system and tested everything and developed it right for the system to become self-sustaining. If you miss a single darn thing,
Single thing.
it falls apart. That's deal with it. That's just true, right? Now you could just say, well, we don't know. Can you show me God? I was like, yeah. Okay, can you show me the architect that built your house? Can you show me the architect that built this highway? Can you show me those like yeah, we can go back and forth. Yeah, but is there a highway? Yeah. Do you need a designer for that highway? Yeah, okay. So we're saying the same thing, right? Exactly. So that's kind of where I land at least. And it's very and it's in many ways it is so liberating when you realize that you can take accountability for what you do, but you also realize that you're just part of this grand story, and all you
Yes.
really have to do is do your best and do your part. It is so liberating. That doesn't mean you don't take accountability. You're actually taking, you just really define what your user role is, which is what I talk about in my book.
Yes.
What you're supposed to be doing, what you're supposed to understand, who you are, and
Your
how to
purpose.
operate. Your purpose. There
It's
you
your
go.
purpose. And if you
Yep.
are
Yep.
online with your purpose, you're going to leave good seeds, and good seeds
Absolutely.
produce good fruits. Bad
Yeah.
seeds produce what? They weeds, right? We already
Yeah.
have so much made
Parasite.
on the planet, right? Parasites, virus, like from a
Exactly.
computer, right? You want to leave a virus alone. And I love what you say. You talk about the matrix. You have really great questions. And could I just read just a small section of my book? Kind of ties in what we're talking about. Let me find this really quick. Okay, so this is just a section. I call it a light on the lampstand. This is on the ending, towards the ending of my book. With all of this suffering and uncertainty surrounding us, what are we to do? The Darwinian paradigm tells us that we're nothing more than evolved monkeys. The more our civilization unravels at the seams, it is expected we will devolve to the survival of the fittest. What if part of the grand conspiracy of the Illuminati is to keep humankind blinded to what we truly are? The Bible tells us that we are created in God's image. What if it is true that we are so much more than a bundle of instinctual impulses encased within a meat suit? What if we are like the quote attributed to the philosopher Teilhard de Chardin, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Perhaps humankind has been kept in the dark for thousands of years because of the hidden slave masters' fear that if we know the truth will set us free, and the matrix they have created will be revealed for what it really is, a simulated reality meant to keep humankind living like slaves while being under the illusion that we are free. I cannot help but think of the metaphor of the elephant who's tethered to a leash that is staked into the ground. The elephant has the strength to easily snap the tether and free itself. However, it never tries because when the elephant was little, it was secured with chains. When it was first taken into captivity, the elephant tried with all of its might countless times to free itself from the chain to no avail. Over time, the chains were replaced with simple tethers. The elephant had tried so many times early on and failed, it believed it was bound forever. It did not realize its true power because it had been mentally conditioned to be a prisoner by its captor.
Wow, that is beautiful. That almost sounds like a poem. It is esoteric and pragmatic at the same time. Wow, that is beautiful.
And so I have a question for you, Armel, because
Okay.
you interested in the Matrix and you wrote a book. I'd be curious to get your book, and I'd like to send you a copy of my book
Oh,
um,
sure.
about the Matrix. So, do you think if enough people awakened and realized that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and really looked into our past and realized that we are so much more than just producers and consumers, do you think if enough of us came to that level of consciousness that we could actually break out of this matrix that we're living in?
I think that's an obvious yes to me. And not only break out, create a better
Create a
world.
better.
Yes, absolutely. That's a 100% yes. I really think that because I understand how it's liberating at a human at a one person level, right? And there's this synergy because if you think about how society works, if you think about a little business or like a family, if you create an entity where you really have people defining the role and the business is firing on all cylinders, and everybody really understands what the goal is, that's what explains business is exploding. If you see something like a Google or like a SpaceX, where everybody like you have the best talent. The best talent is the people that really understand the mission and are going in wholeheartedly to get you to that result. And if you now kind of scale that out to the scale of the planet, and everybody's kind of like almost like in beast mode, like everybody truly understand what they need to do, then it becomes like spontaneously, like the system itself just gets better by the sheer fact that everybody truly understands the mission. And like Elon says that he doesn't really manage the smart people who work with, they manage themselves because they understand. You don't have to say, hey, John, I need you to go do this, or no, you already know, and it becomes so efficient. Like you need very little energy and time. You don't have to sit there and give instructions and directions. Everybody just knows. Like a top tier basketball team. Like every player, almost everybody becomes like an A grade player. That's how I that's kind of how I view it. Like everybody becomes top tier and everybody becomes like the goat or the beast. Like they become so good at it, so good at being humans, so good at living on this planet that this whole all what we call like what people talk about climate change, or people talk about wars, and people talk about poverty, there's always going to be a contingent of people that are going to be unsatisfied, people that are always going to see, people that always just see problems and never think beyond the fact that, okay, I've seen the problem, right? Once you become aware at that level, you almost everybody becomes part of the solution. Now the problem almost works itself out. Like you don't have to struggle with all these worldly problems we have, because if you become truly aware, a good example would be if you become truly aware of aware spiritually and physically, you automatically start eating right, for instance. Like you know you can't eat certain things. Now that takes that disease is gone. Disease is reduced. You become aware that, oh, having kids is not a bad idea. The planet is not gonna die because I'm gonna have kids. And everybody start having more babies and people start thriving. And then there is even our leaders, the policies they make become policies that truly work for the people. And then if something doesn't work for the people, there's something I talked about in one of my previous videos. I talked about the three letters, the three pillars that are going to take Africa out of poverty. The three of them, I believe they are um, honesty is one, pragmatism is the other one, and there's three of them. Anyways, you begin to almost self-correct. It's almost like it becomes like a self-correcting dynamic in the world. The world basically becomes a better place in the true sense of what that statement actually means. Literally, a better place. And that doesn't mean that there's not gonna be bad apples. It's not gonna be some
Right.
crazy guy doing something stupid. It's always gonna be exceptions, right? That's what we call outliers. No matter how good you make your system, that's why as good as the body is, that's kind of why you get sick from time to time. Sometimes
Yeah,
something goes wrong.
exactly.
But overall, the system now becomes thrive. The system begins to thrive almost by itself. All it has is new information. All it has is the truth. All it has is the truth. And once, that's why the Bible says, truth will set you free. Quite
That's
literally.
very, very well said. And can you see why the powers that be that want to keep people subjugated, that want to control people, that want to keep them in fear? Can you see why they do not want us to see the truth? They do not want the truth to set us free. They want to keep us in the matrix so we can be controlled.
That is so sad.
And
That is
I would like to leave with just a couple of things here. One question is that many people have, that with all the things going on in the world, all the craziness, the wars, the pandemics, all just what can we do? Like it's so easy to get overwhelmed, like there's so much stuff beyond our control. Like what can I even do about this? Well, it starts with, I think it's called the locus of control. And it's a psychological concept. Imagine a series of concentric circles. In the center of that circle, it represents the area that you have the most control over. And that is what? That is my own beliefs. That is my own values. That is my own relationship with God. That is my own behaviors. That is what I have most control over. That's like taking responsibility. And as I go outside of that circle, the next circle might be my close relationships, my relationships with my family, my relationships with my friends. The circle goes out, my relationship with my local community. The circle goes out a little bit further, local government. And the further we get outside of that central circle, the less
correct.
control we have. And we get into like the government, right? And then we get into world government, and then we get into the weather, right? We don't have any control over that. So keep your focus not on out all these outer circles,
Center of that circle.
right here in the center, like with our relationship with God, with our relationship with our families, with our relationship with our friends, with our local communities. And how can we plant good seeds within those areas, right? And those will spread. It's amazing. It's like a rock thrown into a pond. When that rock hits the water, you don't know how many ripples does that go out. How many ripples? What are the people that we affect that we might not even ever know? We might meet a stranger, and just the way we interact and treat them, and maybe something we say to them, or just showing that we care a little bit about them, we might not know what kind of impact that has on them ever.
Be the change you want to see in the
The
world.
change. So go back to that center. That's what we can do. Develop yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Those four pillars, develop that, and everything else will go out from there. And I'll leave with this Proverbs 3, 5, 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will direct your path.
So the one question that I actually have two more questions, and I have a poll for you before we part. So um the question for my wife would be, what would you tell your younger self if you could go back in time and give him a piece of advice it's that is supposed to help the younger you know, be more successful as you grow older? What would you advise yourself if you could travel back in time somewhere somehow and
That
talk
is
to the
such an amazing question. You have a very, very thoughtful, intelligent wife. That's a very good question. I would basically summarize what I just said in Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he'll direct your paths. But also, too, I would add, be humble. Always be humble, learn, constantly learn from whoever you interact with. Someone, everyone you meet has something to teach you, even if it's a person you don't like, you have trouble interaction, they have something to teach you about yourself, right? So never stop learning, keep growing, and look beyond yourself. Share your knowledge, share your experiences with other people, plant good seeds. That's what
Yeah.
I would tell myself.
And the next question, I think I know the answer to, but I'm gonna ask
Okay.
anyway. What is your philosophy of life, and why do you believe
Oh
it?
man, I just go back to Proverbs 3, 5, 6.
Exactly. I think I
Yeah,
know
as
what it
I
is, and I'm gonna
yeah,
ask.
it's this. It's my purpose on this planet is to find my purpose, God's purpose for me, to connect with that, right? So
Yeah.
we have two lines here. This is us down here living our life, and we have God up here, right? So we could live our whole life just going our own way, our own path, right? God's here, but we could go our own path. But here's what I say: direct up, connect with the source, connect with God, develop your relationship, and let Him direct your path. Don't go on your own. Connect with the source.
That's how you
Be
get to have
guided.
meaning.
And
That's what make it make sense. That's what's gonna help you make it make sense.
and I want to leave this world, Armel, a little bit better of a place
Uh,
because I was here. I want to
wow.
leave a little something. I don't want to take. I don't want to take as much as I can and then I'm gone. I want to leave. I want to plant something, leave it behind. Something that's going to grow, that's going to produce good fruit, whether it's through the interactions with my relationships, through my children and how I teach them and the values I teach them, and they will leave that behind and they will pass that on. So I want to bear good seed, bear good fruit.
That's beautiful. So beautifully said. And then the final question is really a poll, but I call it a question. So I have a list of things. So I'm gonna give you a list of things, and then the question is, I'll need you to rank those things as in order. The first one being the highest, whatever your ranking is, right, and the last one being the lowest, as to what is going to be the most impactful thing with on our civilization over the next say 50 to 100 years.
Yeah,
Just looking out, which is no time in the grand scale
sure.
scheme of things, obviously.
Yeah,
So the first thing that I want, well, the four things that I'll need you to rank is: one is robo taxis, basically kind of like sort of like Uber, but you have robo taxis everywhere. You could go anywhere at any time. Use either an app or you go to a bus stop, push a button.
mhm.
And then the second thing would be energy, and I'm not ranking them. I'm just listing them
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
You have energy, and then you have humanoid robots. So basically, something like I don't know what's the name of the robot Tesla is developing. They're developing a robot as well. And then the fourth thing is medicine, and the fifth thing is spirituality. So you have robotaxis,
yeah,
energy, humanoid robots, so like a robot that's like a human that can do stuff.
yeah,
Then you have medicine, which is like doctors, surgeries, medicines, big pharma, you name it. And then the final thing in my list would be spiritual awakening. So what do you think over the next? And I know there's a lot of buzz about AI. The reason I didn't put AI in my list is because in my view it genuinely has an impact on everything, and it's going to help power all these things anyway. In the same way that you have like a Bible app, or in the same way that I have like an app that helps you monitor how much energy you consume, you have AI basically impacting all of these aspects, right? However, what is your ranking of robotaxis, energy, humanoid robots, medicine, and true spiritual awakening? What do you think has the greatest potential? And pragmatically, what do you think is actually this century, over the next 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years, is going to actually impact us and change the face of this country and probably the world at large?
Fantastic questions. Boy, you have a lot of really good questions, Armel. I would say no doubt number one would be spirituality. We have to go back to that. We have to reconnect with God. If we don't do that, if we shove God aside, then what's going to happen is all these other technologies with the AI, with the robots, with all these other things, they're going to be eventually used for the wrong purposes. We have to go back to God. That is our survival of our civilization, is to return back to our spirituality. Because if we don't, then we are going to
We're not going
destroy
to crash.
ourselves,
Okay, so spirituality is your number one. What's number two?
is number one. Um, and so there was robotics, the robot.
So you have robo taxis and you have humanoid robots, and then you have the energy sector, and then you have medicine.
Well, I think what should be important is second one is medicine. However, how I feel, I really distrust our big pharma,
Yep,
especially after we've seen with the COVID,
yep.
and the lies, the World Health Organization, and just everything. I have personal family members and friends that have been injured by the vaccines, that
Yep.
are being denied by the big pharma, that these things aren't caused by the vaccines. And so
Fortunately.
if we get it right spiritually, then everything's going to fall into place, right? Then medicine is very important. We have technologies now that could really enhance our life experiences and give
Mm-hmm.
us higher quality of life. Instead, we're constantly be pushed drugs, drugs, and not addressing the core
The
problem,
root
right?
causes,
Get a
you just
drug
create
to deal with
symptoms and then causing other problems,
that's
and then it's
right.
a vicious cycle.
That's right. That's right. But in my opinion, if we get the spirituality right, then
Everything
we'll
else
get
kind of falls
the
apart.
medicine right. If we're corrupt spiritually, every one of those other aspects are going to be corrupted. And that's why we see with big pharma how much corruption is going on, especially within the past, 5 years. So
Yes,
I
yes.
believe spirituality, I believe medicine, and what were the other ones? One was robotics.
Yeah, one was robo taxis, and then one was
Robotics.
humanoid robots, and they have energy, like as in electricity, nuclear
And
energy, all of that.
energy is the next one. Again, it all stems from getting it right spiritually. Then we will use these technologies for the right reasons. I believe we have energy. I believe there's such a thing as free energy. I believe Tesla had made some incredible discoveries, and that if we got it right spiritually, that we would use these technologies for the benefit of humankind, instead of using it to suppress people. There was a gentleman a few years ago, he was an African American gentleman. He was working on an engine that ran off water. He said he had developed that. You know what happened to him? He was killed in a mass shooting. He was killed in a mass shooting. And it kind of makes me wonder, well, that's just coincidence that this guy was making this development and he just happened to be at this place where a mass shooter was, and he just happened to be one of the people that was shot. Well, what happened to his research? What happened to that? Did that just
Didn't know.
disappear? Right? What happened to Tesla's research after he died? Was that ever shared with the world?
The pattern
Right.
here.
Right. So we get the spirituality, we get the medicine, we get the free energy that can benefit humanity. And then I think the next one would be the humanoid
Robots.
robots. And that stuff makes me nervous. It makes me nervous. I've
So
seen
the
too many
Terminator.
Terminator movies, Skynet, and
Guy-
I just know that it can be used for the benefit of humanity, but I myself see just being used in the wrong way. I just saw a video. Have you seen that? I'm sure you've seen the robot dog.
Yes, yes, yes.
Now you can buy one for
Yeah.
$10,000 that has a flamethrower mounted to it. Have you seen the videos of that?
No, I haven't. Oh god.
Yeah, this robot dog's running through with a flamethrower, flaming everything. And it said, and I thought, what in the world? Why would someone create that? And it said because, oh, it can be used to like fire burning on farmland or everything. And I'm like going, terrorists are going to get this, criminals are going to get these things. our government, who knows what kind of technology they have that are going to be used against us with a tyrannical government, right? So
Yeah,
it's got to start from the top. You've got to go back to spirituality. You've got to go back and get right with God, because if you're not, all those things are corrupted. All those areas, and the last one was the Uber, was the
yeah,
self-driving cars.
yeah. Self-driving
I'm
cars.
not.
So
I'm sorry. I'm not riding in one of those. I'm not there. I'm not. I'm not doing. I'll walk. I'll ride a
oh
bicycle.
boy.
I'm not going in one of those cars. I'm not doing it.
Oh wow, that's very very interesting. That is awesome, man. It's been a very enlightening conversation. I've learned a lot just talking to you for a couple of
I
hours.
have too. Yeah, you really given me
Yeah,
some good questions and ideas to
to
ponder.
think about. Yeah, so it's been fantastic, man. I think we probably should do a round two of this conversation because
Absolutely. You just named it. And I haven't done a podcast for a while. There was a period of time when I came out with my book, I for like a year and a half, I was doing a whole bunch. And then I was like, oh man, I'm gonna take a break. And then you reached and I took a break for a while, and then you reached out and I thought, yeah, I'll do it again. But this has been very, very enjoyable, Armel. Do you
yeah,
realize we started it at my time, 6 o'clock, 6 in the morning? It's
yeah.
8:47 now, and I feel like we've been in conversation for about 30 minutes, right?
No, right? That's how
But
it feels.
there's
It's like
synergy, exchange of information, and it's just like, man,
yeah,
I could
time is
keep going.
flies. Yeah, I can keep going forever. But yeah, and I have so much. I actually had a whole bunch of questions around. There's this entity out sitting out something. There's something sitting out in outer space right now. There's something that looks like a satellite that wasn't put there by NASA, and that's something I want to get into. But I
That the
think
Dark Knight? Are you referring to
yeah,
the
the
Dark
Dark
Knight?
Knight. Yeah,
We'll have to
that's
have a part two. But there's
yeah,
no
yeah.
doubt
We need
we'll
we
have to
need to
have
have
a
a
part
part two,
two.
man. We definitely need to have a part. We need to talk about the Sirius star system, those three stars, because it's really A, B, and C, and that might is it the Palladian system? So there's some aspects of there's some cosmological aspect of ancient history that I wanted to talk to. So we'll probably have to schedule around two, but yeah, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I feel blessed. I feel honored to have spent because this 2 3 hours that we spent together is 2 hours of your life that you've given to me, and I really want to say thank you. And I just wanted to know that I really appreciate it and I acknowledge it, and I'm not gonna waste it. I have learned a lot from you. So before we go, do you want to tell the audience, how to find you, where to get your book? You have a website, your social
Absolutely.
media, and
Well,
how do they?
first off, I want to say thank you very much, Armel, for having me on. You've been a blessing as well. It's just been a fantastic conversation. You're very, very good at what you do. Natural. It just flows. Your curiosity, your questions, just come out. It's all natural to you. Nothing scripted. So kudos
Yeah,
to you, man. Keep doing
thank
what you're
you.
doing. You're very, very good. Very fun to come on. And thank you to your audience too for tuning in. My book is this one, The Red-Haired Giants of Lovelock Cave and Other Ancient Mysteries. You
Okay.
can get it on Amazon, but I would prefer, because I'm a self-published author, I go through BookBaby is where I published my book, and I would prefer, if possible, for people to go to bookbaby.com and purchase my book. It just that company helps out self-published authors like myself more than, say, big companies like Amazon do. But you can also find my book on Amazon as well. I'm currently revamping my website, so I don't have that operational yet. But I do have a YouTube channel. I don't have a lot on there, but I do have some podcasts on there. It's at Floyd Wills, Floyd Wills, Wills at 8681. And you can find out more information, or you can just do a general Google search on me, type in my name, and a whole bunch of podcasts are gonna pop up.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that, and I'll make sure to include all the links. Because usually, prior to publishing, I'll actually go in and make sure that I find all your handles if I can find them. If you have a
Sure.
website, YouTube channel. I'll include everything in the description
Okay.
below. So thank you very much. We are going to do a part two. I'll be
We're going to
reaching
do a
out.
part two, and if you can send me some kind of topics or questions, because there's a lot of stuff. I mean, there's so much in this field. Like I'm just like I know this much in a little section, and there's this much to know. So if
Oh
you
yeah,
give me some idea of subjects you want to talk about, but really we only scratched the surface of my book. We only covered a little bit on the
little bit.
giants, but there's little people, the little people. There's ancient stuff on ancient genetic engineering, um,
Wow.
Anunnaki, and we did touch on some on the Anunnaki. But yeah, a lot of stuff on there. We just scratched the surface,
We
my
just
friend.
got started. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
definitely gonna have to do a part two of this conversation. But Floyd, man, I thank you very much. I have no
Dude,
idea. I feel so blessed. I'm gonna have a great weekend because of this conversation. I
you
feel
too.
awesome, and I want to say thank you for taking the time, and we'll keep in touch, and we'll definitely be getting around too. So guys, stay on the lookout. If you haven't yet, go ahead and click the subscription button, comment, and I really just want to encourage you guys to go get Floyd's book. I will do that myself. Matter of fact, I have to order that book today because I haven't ordered the book.
Thank you,
But
and send me the name of your book, and I'd like to order a copy of your book
oh
on the
yeah,
Matrix.
oh yeah, that's right. It's called The Matrix Explained: Redefining Your User Role. If you can just either Google my name or you go to Amazon. I'm also self-published like yourself, so if you go to Amazon, you just Google either the title or my name. You find the book. It's
Okay,
available audio, hard copy, paperback, and also have a Kindle version, which is basically free. So it's
cool.
available out there.
I'll get it, and then I'll have some questions for you, Armel.
All right, hey man, go for it. Let's do
Sounds
it.
good. Well, you have a blessed day. You take good care, and we'll be in touch.
All right, man. Thank you very much. Have a good one
Here.
too. Bye.
Very good. Bye bye.